for me, after being there for almost 6 years now, I was thinking, man, I really want to start taking all these skills that I've learned in my engineering and producing and mixing and editing and kind of put myself to the test. I was like, okay, well, how can I do this? And I'm not a filmmaker, but I love films. And I was sitting around with my roommate one day. This was like 3 years ago. You know, he wasn't going out on as many auditions as he was hoping to. And I'm like, yeah, man, I'm not getting as many projects to score. We're just sitting and just like, man. So finally we stopped. We're like, what if we made our own project? Oh, can we do that? Are we allowed to do that? Screw it, let's do it.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 96 of the Andrew Deitch podcast. Happy Labor Day if you live in the United States. Hope you guys are all spending some time with friends and family, having a nice celebration, but thanks for joining me. If this is your first time checking out the show, thank you so much. I just want to say it is super dope that my voice is traveling through your eardrums right now. That never stops being cool. This show is all about people who I find to be very interesting. Maybe they're an entrepreneur, an athlete, entertainer, influencer, whatever. I find them and I kill them. No, I'm just kidding. We meet up in person and we have an awesome conversation where they share their stories and how they got to where they are today. So my guest today is fellow podcaster and digital instrument creator Raul Vega, or Raul Vega if you're just being normal. But you might be thinking Raul and I do the same thing, but our podcasts are actually extremely different, but in a good way. So this podcast is conversational, it's unscripted, it's in person, it's unedited, and it is also nonfiction, of course. And Raul's podcast is actually more like a TV show or a drama for your ears. It's like audio porn. The show is called Rose Drive, and it's a fictional mystery podcast that has over 50,000 downloads worldwide, over 100 5-star ratings on Apple Podcasts, and his podcast was actually featured on the front page of his hometown newspaper, which is pretty cool, which is where the podcast is based out of, or the fictional city in the podcast is based on his hometown. So they featured it. It's pretty cool. But by day, he works for the super famous Phil score composer and record producer Hans Zimmer. As a digital instrument creator, I think that's the proper term, so we're just going to go with it. But his team creates scores for tons of films you've definitely heard of, like The Dark Knight, Superman, The Lion King, and tons of others. As a sound designer for Zimmer, Raul has a very fascinating approach to storytelling, and he puts all of his audio talents to work on his podcast, Rose Drive. And so 1 year ago last week, that's when he actually launched the Rose Drive podcast. And from writing the script, directing, producing, editing, scoring, mixing, and mastering, he has really got his hands full, but I think he's got a very successful show on his hands, and he is definitely doing something right. So before we jump into the podcast, I'm actually going to play the trailer for the Rose Drive podcast so you can get a taste of the epicness that you're in for when you go check it out, and then we'll jump right into the conversation. So throw on your headphones and enjoy the show.
Loss. Nobody can prepare you for it. There's no warning. It just happens and we're left to deal with the aftermath. For you, it only lasts a few moments. But for me, it's timeless. My name is Marcus Hill. And if you're listening to this, then you've agreed to walk with me on my path for justice. But before we begin, let me get you up to speed on what has already happened. You see, 10 years ago, one man ruined my family. Before anything could be done, he vanished. His disappearance rendered my quaint little hometown speechless. A town known for its warmth, acceptance, and compassion. But as the saying goes, there's always more to something than meets the eye. There are secrets buried here that, if revealed, could destroy the sanity of every person in town. My instincts tell me he is the root of the unspoken darkness that lives here. I can't prove it on my own, though. That's why I need your help. But first, there are things you need to understand when dealing with the residents of this place. Every word you hear, every story that's told. Keep note of it. And most importantly, remember these 7 lessons 1. Money controls everything, especially with those who have it. 2. Smiles can be deceptive. You don't know what hides beneath. 3. Friendliness is a weapon. Trust is ammunition. 4. Influence is power. Power means immortality. 5. Information is a commodity and it costs you more than you think. 6. Addiction is pervasive. Everyone has dark tendencies. 7. Helpfulness is self-serving. Question everything you hear, even from those that you love. Once we start, there's no going back. So get comfortable. Put on your headphones, turn the volume up, and pay attention. Are you listening?
Don't let them see you.
All right. Well, just like that, we are live. Yeah. Raul Vega. Am I saying that correctly?
You are. That is correct.
How do people like mispronounce it?
Some people say Paul, some people say Raul, some people say Raul, some people say Raul. Vega part seems to be fine.
Yeah.
It's that first name, which just blows my mind, considering I live in Los Angeles and California. So
it's just Raul?
Raul
Vega.
Yeah.
I'm gonna use that as something. I'm gonna have to use that.
Copyright.
Yeah.
As long as I get my royalties with it, I'm fine.
Exactly. Very nice. Well, very cool. So we're here now. I was about to say we're here in LA. We're here in Atlanta.
Yeah.
Which is for the past couple. So the last podcast that people will have been able to listen to was recorded in LA.
Oh, what?
But now we're back in Atlanta, and Raul is here. From LA.
Yes, sir. Yes,
so
sir.
it's
Thank you for having me, man.
It's kind of a mix-up. Yeah.
I really appreciate it. I was excited and looking forward to this for the past month, and I'm glad we finally got to make this work.
I know, man. And the weirdest thing, so I make all kinds of weird connections with the podcast. Like I'm kind of, I try to be open and, just trying to meet people and all that. It's actually, so we're in my friend Kat's apartment. I've recorded some podcasts here in the past, including the one that I did with her.
Oh,
and
perfect.
That's how I met her, was through the podcast, which is pretty crazy. So
you're just making connections all over the globe, man.
I know.
That's beautiful.
It's been a really cool opportunity. It's been really fun. So, yeah. But I was gonna say we actually connected on Bumble Biz.
Oh yeah,
didn't we?
It's a really romantic story, man. Yeah.
We connected on Bumble.
I was wondering. I was about to say. I was like, are we gonna tell the kids how we met, Andrew? Tell them our story.
Tell the kids.
I don't know if they're ready for this.
That's amazing. Yeah, there's like a weird taboo, even with like dating, like when you tell people like, oh, so how'd you guys meet? And you're kind of like, at a bar.
Yeah,
and it's like we met.
For some reason, it's like people are still weird about that. But
yeah, but honestly, like, if like saying that you met someone on Tinder is almost like better because you can vet them a little bit.
Right.
Whereas like if you meet someone at a bar, it's almost like a little more sketchy.
It is.
To be honest.
Yeah, at least at Bumble.
The tables have turned.
Yeah, at least on some of those apps, there's at least like it'll show you the mutual connection, so you can try to vet a little bit. It's not like complete stranger danger, but
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there was an app called Shaper that's basically it's very similar to like Bumble Biz or whatever the heck. And it's like professional networking, essentially.
Yeah.
Kind of, but totally platonic, totally professional. But
right.
Bumble Biz hasn't really taken off in the way that I think they wanted it to. But it's kind of cool.
Yeah, I've actually, obviously I met you through that. I've met a couple other people that I've linked up with in LA and other actors and other people, actors. Actors, I'm not an actor. But I've actually met some pretty cool people through. I was, at first, when I was doing it the first time too, I was like, what, this is...
It's kind of weird.
Yeah, especially when I tell you, how'd you guys meet? Bumble? Okay.
The weird thing is that it's still connected to the Bumble app. Mm-hmm. So, like, it's weird because you've got all these conversations and you've got, like, the dating conversations interlaced with the professional conversation. And it's just, like, it's a weird thing.
You gotta be careful how you respond.
I think if they spun it off into its own app, it would be less weird.
Right.
But like there's some people on Bumble Biz where I don't think they realize that it's like a separate profile.
Yeah.
And so they like their profile is like the same as their dating profile.
I've seen that.
And it's just weird.
And like on the Bumble Biz, like people will be like, yeah, I'm just looking for a man who can play. And I'm like, wait, hold up. Why you got all these duck face pictures up, or why you got all these shirtless pictures up? Like, this is no.
This is Bumble Biz.
We keep it
professional. This is like LinkedIn over here, man. What are you doing? People can't know you take your shirt off sometimes.
Who does that?
Who does that?
Never nudes. Never.
That's amazing. Well, Raul, so I've already kind of introduced you a little bit in the intro that I kind of do afterwards, but if you can kind of just describe in your own words for people kind of like what you do right now, and
Sure.
and then we can talk about what you do, man.
All the craziness. Cool. So I live in Los Angeles. I've been there for about 6 years now. Originally from San Francisco Bay Area. Studied music. Went to Cal State Long Beach. Focused on film composition. I always knew I wanted to work on film music. That was the thing that was driving force, which kept me from staying in the Bay. I was like, well, if I'm going to do it, I should do it down in LA. So I went to Cal State Long Beach and studied music and composition, and wanted to be like one of the greats, like John Williams and Danny Elfman and James Newton Howard, James Horner, and of course Hans Zimmer.
Little name.
Like, this just this little guy, and. And yeah, man, after college, I landed myself an internship actually at Hans Zimmer's studio in Santa Monica. And, I was like,
and for people that don't know, Hans Zimmer is a composer, producer?
He's kind of all of the above. He's a film composer that has been around for a very long time. His credits, there's not enough time to list them all right now, but he's known for... the Batman trilogy movies, the Pirates of the Caribbean, Lion King, Last
Simpsons
Samurai,
movie.
The Simpsons movie. More recently, Blade Runner 2049, Dunkirk. So this guy is just like, he is that iconic film composer. So he's the one who every film composing nerd wants to just like know, or work with. And I was fortunate enough to land myself at an internship at a studio, just making coffee and doing all that stuff at the end of The Dark Knight Rises, and then, did my 5 weeks there, and then it ended, and I was like, well, shit, what do I do now?
Were you really just like getting coffee and stuff?
Yeah,
it was like
man.
Just like that really stereotypical internship?
Coffee, food runs, delivering orders and files and picking things up, picking up posters. Like anything that he or the studio needed, that was what my job was. Me and a group of other people, you do like a 5-week internship, and kind of just have to work through it. Once that had finished, they were finishing on the end of The Dark Knight Rises, so the last Batman movie, and that had wrapped, so everybody left for the summer. And so I was sitting there like, okay, I really don't know what to do now. I guess I'll start applying to like Guitar Center and Sam Ash, because I just had this crazy opportunity, and I talked to the operations manager there. I was like, look, I know everybody comes to you after their internships and is like, hey, if you have a job, I'd love to take one. Yeah. And he told me, he's like, look, man, you did fine here. We nobody had a problem with you. You did a good job, but everybody's gone for the summer. Because that's how it works. We work on these big projects, these large, blockbuster summer flicks for 3/4 of the year, and then once summer hits, it's usually when people kind of try to relax and disappear for a little bit. So I was.
How many people work in that studio? Like work for Hans?
So there's actually a small handful of us on a larger scale. So you kind of got to look at Hans's studio as his studio, but it's also kind of like his real estate. There's a bunch of other film composers who have worked for him or with him that have launched their own brands or their own companies that rent space out of there.
Gotcha.
So Henry Jackman used to work for him, who now did a couple of Captain America movies, Wreck-It Ralph, Jumanji recently.
That's awesome. The Wreck-It Ralph soundtrack was actually
it was
awesome.
dope, right? Yeah.
So dope.
Really cool.
I loved that movie.
Ramin Djawadi has a studio there. He does the music for Game of Thrones and Westworld.
Wow.
So
you'll have to tell Kat and Gabe that, because they nerd out on that.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, we're in the middle of Westworld right now.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I'll have to tell them about that. Yeah.
That's so awesome.
Yeah, so it's kind of a big, in that sense, it's a campus, right? So there's like 6 buildings. Everybody kind of has their own world and their own companies there. But for him, I didn't even get to that point. I work for him. Fortunately, I was lucky enough to get a phone call a month after my internship, and they said they wanted to try me on in the sampling department. I was just like, okay.
That's amazing. And so you'd already gotten your degree, like you were already graduated and everything.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting, because like a lot of people in that field, I've had friends that have gone to be audio engineers or whatever, and then kind of came out of that world of college and then realized like, oh shit, like
Yeah.
you got to either be really kind of lucky, right place, right time, or you're going to be recording some really shitty rappers for a long time.
Yeah.
You know?
You can even stop with that because that's exactly what it is. I mean, luck, happenstance, that is such a huge part of it. I mean, that's pretty much all of it. I mean, the being talented, being hardworking, being gifted and all that shit.
And being likable. Like you said,
being
like,
likable,
you know, you said at the studio, like no one had a problem with you.
Right.
That's super important because people don't want to bring someone on. It doesn't matter how skilled you are, but if you suck as a person.
I'm telling you, man, and it's one of those things that that's something that I wish more schools would teach and more people would kind of be aware of, is like the social awareness of the environment. Because one thing I learned, I mean, I'm a pretty easygoing person, and you know, that's just kind of my personality, so that helped. But like, knowing when to talk and knowing when not to talk is important. Understanding the stress levels that are going around, because we're working on some really big projects, and there's times where you just don't have.
I'm sure the time crunch is really, really challenging.
Oh man, and it's always changing. This industry is just nonstop. It is relentless, and there's times where it's happening, you know, in our own intimate world of our studio, but a lot of it's affected by what's happening beyond that.
Yeah.
You know, things that are so out of our control, and it just starts just like an avalanche. So we're all just kind of like drowning, trying to swim and stay afloat. But
that's why
kind
at
of
the summertime everyone like leaves and like,
exactly.
Oh, we made it through the avalanche.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I need to take a break.
Pretty much, man. Yeah. So
that's funny.
It's crazy. But my specific job there is I'm a digital instrument builder. So I record musicians, non-musicians, instruments, violins, guitars, drums, trash cans, whatever the hell it is, box cars. I did that before. I've actually sampled this whole train system, which is kind of crazy. Yeah, just depends on what the project calls for, what he's looking at, and I'll record all these sounds into Pro Tools, edit them, clean them up, get them all nice and sexy, and then turn it into software that he then plays and manipulates on his keyboard that he will weave into the score on top of having a live orchestra. So it's this combination of live musicians, live instruments and sounds mixed with this digital stuff and with stuff that we can take those elements and really expand beyond what the human is able to do.
That's amazing. So like your job like primarily is to take like real world stuff, change it into like a digital form so that it can be replayed on some sort of like MIDI instrument or something like that.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, because I'm like that stuff super fascinates me because I'm definitely big into like electronic music and stuff right now, and that's one thing that's kind of I feel like a lot of people aren't doing is creating their own sounds.
Right.
They're just taking samples from other sample packs or whatever stuff like that, which it's kind of like fair use and like remixing. It's like it is its own new thing once you play it and once you've created that new thing, but like at the end of the day, the sounds that you're using were like created by someone else in some other program.
Right.
And if you can, like a lot of really cool artists that I respect a lot, like I know that they'll use like some vocals and turn that into like a synth or something like that. And like that's really cool because that's a unique sound to that person, to that artist. Like they didn't buy it in some like sound pack or something.
Well, and that's the whole reason I even have a job. That's why we exist. My department, literally. I'm one of two people who have been doing this for 6 years now, and it's there's something to be said for. There's something my music teacher told me many years ago. I said, because when I would write music, I always played at the piano, and I always start with the piano, and then I would start writing the violin lines or percussive lines, whatever, around that. But my home and comfort was in the piano, not realizing how limiting that was because I have tendencies. And his advice was, if you let your fingers always do the walking, they're always going to walk the same way. And I thought that was kind of interesting. The way that can kind of apply to this is that if everybody is using, so just to give people kind of context with these samples, these sounds, so you're basically able to have any instrument or sound at your fingertips, right? And there's several third-party libraries out there that any composer, DJ, producer, whatever, people can get down with. That's royalty-free. You don't have to pay anything. You pay to use it, or pay the monthly subscription.
One time, or crack it, or
right,
hack it,
whatever,
or steal it from a friend, or whatever.
And you use it, and you're good to go. You don't have to hire an orchestra or whatever. It's a lot cheaper to do it this way. And you have these sounds at your, you can do it whatever you want.
Literally
with it,
at your fingertips.
At
It's
your
amazing.
fingertips.
with just a laptop, which is crazy.
And it's cool that you can start making music that way. It's so like accessible. But here's the problem is if everybody's using the same Hollywood cinematic brass or whatever libraries or the same hip hop packs from Loop Masters or whatever it is, everybody's shit's going to start sounding the same. And, you know, the way we like to look at projects, the way I look at projects, definitely the way Hans looks at projects, is he looks at the projects as the music as another actor in the film. It's another character. And with that come the dialogue. And the dialogue for us are the instruments and the notes. And, you know, why would you want to bring another actor from another film into this new project? That doesn't make sense. You want to start new and fresh. So every project, there's a whole new color palette that we pull from, that we record, and that he, you know, comes up with ideas with, and we try to manifest those ideas. And he has that at his disposal so that he can really create something that the world has never heard before. And that's the challenge, is every new project, how do we take this up a notch, and how do we move beyond the traditional 12-note music system and start integrating all these sounds. And I say that to all of the interns that work in my studio, that because I have hours during the week where they'll come in and learn with me, and we'll talk about sampling. And they always say, you know, how do I make it? How do I do all this stuff? And I'm like, well, right now, keep your practice going, keep recording, but also start utilizing your own sounds. That's going to be your signature. You know, whatever project you're working on, find a way to have sounds that correlate with that project. That can be your actor, that can be your voice, that can be your stamp, and that is going to set you apart from everybody else who's using the same, you know, sounds over and over and over again.
Because literally, like, the sounds that you're recording almost can't be reproduced by anyone else.
Yeah, they're yours. That's it. There's nothing else that has been created in that environment with that sound, with that instrument, whatever it is, by your hands, and you get to tweak and do whatever you want to make it work. But that's your signature right there, and that's something that, you know, it's so important in this industry, and I think any industry. I think that can apply to anything you do.
Yeah.
You know,
the more that I kind of learn about like audio and video and all this stuff, because that's kind of a realm that I've dived into the past year or so, the more you realize like how much stuff like overlaps. Like I used to be really big into like Photoshop, and like I realized that like working in that workspace is very similar in certain ways to working in an audio workspace, and also very similar to working in a video workspace, and like, you know, and just the nuances of all that kind of stuff, they all do kind of intertwine. I'm a big believer that like any skill that you learn will ultimately like help you with something else, because you'll be able to make those parallels. There's always like a way to compare something to something else.
Yeah, and that's so true. That is very true. And that almost kind of leads us into where we're heading next. But you know, like, and one thing I want to say too is, and again, I say this to all the interns that sit in with me, and I say this to people I talk to, because my job is such a weird, unique, specific job. It's almost like this combination of audio engineering, sound designing, Foley work, composition in a weird sense. Like I do so many weird placement things and mixing of, you know, and, you know, when I'm in the booth recording with the artists and producing, that's always my favorite, because I, you know, most of my job I'm in front of a computer in a dark ass room. So like when I can talk and interact with humans, like this is great, cool, we can get this working. But you know, I've told people too, so they assume that I had a background in that. They assume that I was always a techie, or I was always in the recording lab. I didn't know how to use a mic until I started working there.
Wow.
And that's something that, God, actually, I hope nobody from the studio's listening and be like, why the hell did we hire this kid?
Well, you've been there for 6 years.
I've been there for 6 years, so you've come at me, no.
But that's just like, sorry to interrupt, but like that's just kind of like proof that, like you said earlier, you know, like you wish they would teach you more stuff like that in school, like, yo, you got to be likable, you got to be able to work together with people. I mean, and they kind of do teach you that in some ways with like group projects and shit like that, but it's like, you know, I was a person that after my freshman year I dropped out of school, so like I didn't finish college, but like I'm realizing that, I mean, there's like so many opportunities out there, but a lot of the opportunities and a lot of the jobs and whatever, like so many of them are dependent on like the relationships that you build, the soft skills that you have. Are you likable? Can you do a good interview? Can you impress the boss? Can you, you know, because it doesn't really matter at the end of the day, like, okay, everyone's kind of got this piece of paper, this diploma, and it's almost become this thing that just, since everyone's got one, it's like,
Right.
okay, what else can you do? And so it's like, it doesn't even really, every job you're going to have, there's always going to be new things to learn. It's like when you get out of college, they're not teaching you a specific position at a certain company.
Right.
You've got all these different skills and different knowledge, but like once you get to that company, there's going to be a period where you're going to have to learn that new job. And so even if you don't know how to work a mic, or you
Right.
don't know how to record things or whatever, like those are things you can learn like fairly quickly, fairly easily. Like once you understand the principles of it, like, you know, you can do the job perfectly. Like my parents, like my mom, you know, she's done all kinds of different jobs, and it has nothing to do with like what she studied in college, but you know, it's like, oh, this job I learned this thing, and then that leveled into this job and with this thing, and then this job, you know, it all kind of snowballs. So it actually makes sense, you know?
Yeah, it does. And even what you're saying before, I think even more important than being likable is being adaptable and understanding that, you know, if you don't have a learner's mindset, you're not going to succeed. You have to constantly, no matter what you're doing, be interested in the art of learning, you know, and wanting to learn. And you know, I will say honestly, what some of my biggest struggles in the beginning process, the first couple of years there, it was learning a lot. I had zero, you know, tech background, zero computer background. I had to learn all these programs, even Pro Tools, which is such an industry standard audio recording software. I never touched it because all the stuff I did was for live musicians and, you know, all that.
What were you using before, like Ableton Live or like?
No, so I was using Logic, and I still do use Logic.
Gotcha.
Logic and Cubase, and I would do that when I was working on my own film scores in college and stuff, but not to the extent that I obviously learn and have to learn them now for my job. But you know, when I was doing stuff in college, all the music was performed live, so it was writing in Finale and Sibelius and all these programs to have musicians read live. But you know, there really wasn't a huge pressure, or honestly, like there should have been more of a pressure, I feel personally, to want to integrate production into, because so many people are, and we didn't even know that was really an option. I knew it was because I knew I wanted to get into film scoring, which I knew involved that. And we had a couple film scoring classes, but for the most part, it's all kind of academic concert-based music. There's some tech stuff too, or some like computer laptop ensembles and stuff that they did at my school, which is really cool. But you know, it's one of those things you kind of have to learn on your own. And I did it on my job, and I'm somebody who, you know, I definitely work very hard, but I also, and this probably isn't foreign to anybody, do not like failing, and I hate screwing up just like most of us. And, you know, there were times where I wasn't taking enough of a chance because I didn't want to risk screwing up, because it was like walking in there. Nobody was making me feel that way except for myself. Right, it's not like I was going to these meetings with Hans and he was like screaming German shit at me and was like, you know, this has to be right. Like, it was never like that. He wanted me to succeed. Everybody wanted me to succeed. Otherwise, what are you doing there?
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly. Why'd they hire you if they're just trying to get you to fail?
Yeah, but when you walk in there feeling like I don't belong here, and you kind of have not that, you know, that lack of confidence, you're like, I'm around all this gear, I'm around all this shit, I'm talking to these like big names, these producers and these directors and these musicians, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. You know, definitely a lot of it is faking it till you make it, but it took a while for me to feel more confident in what it is that I do and communicating, and, you know, not just being someone who will say yes, but somebody who can actively think about, okay, well, if this isn't the right way to go, how can I find a solution in this? Being solution based and wanting to be like, okay, you know, if I run into this problem here, like, you know, like even being afraid of if my musician wasn't doing what I needed them to do, feeling confident enough to speak up and be like, hey, that was fantastic, I think we want to try it this way, and like having that mutual respect, which just takes a bit of time, but you know, you have to be willing to screw up a lot, and I screwed up a lot, but you know, you learn from it, because if you're not learning from whatever it is you're doing, why are you doing it? That's not living, in my opinion, you know.
Exactly.
And you're never going to be bored so long as you're learning, and that's one word I got out of my vernacular years ago. If I ever use the word bored, I'm screwing up my short time on this planet, because you should never be bored. There's always something that you could be learning and doing. And
yeah. Even if you're like, I'm with you, man. Like, I don't understand how, you know, people are always, oh, I'm bored, I'm sitting around the house, blah, 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 I'm bored. I don't know. I'm always fascinated by learning and stuff, and people might even get the wrong idea because I'm like, oh, this guy like dropped out of college, but it's like, no, dude, like I dropped out of college not because I hated learning. I actually am obsessed with learning.
Yeah.
And like I was in school, I wasn't learning the things I wanted to learn. You know, it's like, you know, if you're bored, number one, that probably means not that much is going on in your life, unfortunately, because like I'm constantly just thinking about shit. Like it's hard for me to like just be sitting there stagnant, bored,
Right.
Because there's always like something to work on or something to do or something to think about or a problem to try to solve in my head or whatever. You know,
Yeah.
It's hard to just like sit. I mean, sometimes, you know, like today I went to yoga class. Even, you know, you're supposed to sometimes just be there still and all that. Like, it's hard to
It's a
just
struggle.
not let your mind race and, you know, think about all the stuff you got to do today and all that stuff. But I think to go with the yoga thing, I think like pairing it with movement, when you have to think about like what you're doing with your body, that's when I can like get into that state where I'm not really thinking about that stuff. I'm like I have to focus or I'm going to fall over. I have to focus or I'm going to, you know, pass out or something. Like, you know, and so I like that kind of stuff because my mind, it's hard for me to be bored and almost like in a bad way sometimes where I've got too much going on in my head, you know.
Yeah, but you know, that's kind of proof of what your show is that, I mean, this is proof that learning is what you're obsessed with because literally every guest you have on your show could not be different from the one before or the one you're having after.
Pretty much.
It's completely different environments, different ventures, different backgrounds, different parts of the world. I mean, it's insane. Like you won't listen to this podcast thinking, oh, it's going to be the same thing, the same story. Every story is different, and that's what's fascinating me. I'm like, damn, this is that's why it's really cool to be on this, because I know you're not seeking out the same stories over and over and over of people that are just saying the same. Like, no, like you have this collective of just people, which is really, really cool. Like literally something here for everybody. Yeah. And people get to learn listening to it, you know? So.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I've kind of found, not to like toot my own horn here, but like,
man.
I've always found that I'm interested in like so many different things that I can typically have like a pretty good conversation with anybody. Yeah. And like I even just talking to you, obviously like the podcast, I had to learn a lot of stuff about audio, but also I had friends in that space, and I've been interested in it, and I can like kind of talk about certain things in that world, and then I've just all kinds of stuff. I'm always just fascinated by knowing random shit. So like just having those random little like facts and things to talk about with people is definitely helpful with this this gig, and I think I've kind of found the right thing, because I in the beginning I was afraid of going down a certain niche or a certain path, like this is the success podcast and I'm gonna talk to entrepreneurs that are killing it or whatever, and then I'm just getting bored because then every single episode is the same story, same kind of thing, or this is the fitness podcast and I'm gonna talk to personal trainers and we're gonna, and then after 10 episodes you're like, we're talking about the same stuff every episode. So that's why some people ask me, they like, you need to find a focus, you can find your audience better, and
dude.
And I think I'm living my truth with what I'm doing right now. So
it's very telling, man. And I mean, there's really I haven't heard any other podcasts out here like this, especially ones that just like, hey, I'm going to hit this button, we're going to talk, and what comes out, comes out. And I love that, because obviously because of my, even more as a tech nerd, because I'm just like, I hate when people do really bad cuts when you're talking, and then all of a sudden the voice keeps changing because you can tell that people are laughing, and then it's, you know what I mean? Because they're just cutting. It's
awful.
And you're like, God, this just feels really robotic.
It's actually really funny. So there's a group on Facebook. It's called Podcast Editors Club. And it's a group of people, mainly the people in there are people who edit other people's podcasts for a living. Okay. So like that's what they do every day. They're cutting they're cutting likes, they're cutting stutters, they're cutting bullshit that they don't want in the podcast. And my personal philosophy is, if it sucks, it sucks. If I'm saying like way too many times, I could go back and edit that shit, or I could let it be how I actually am. Maybe I am saying like too many times. I've been known to do that, but maybe that just means that I suck as a podcaster and I need to get better. You know what I mean? And so I think a lot of these editors, they have it in their brain that like, it's my job to fix these people that aren't as, I don't know. I hated to say that they're not good at podcasting, because a lot of them are really good at podcasting and they just want a really polished show. Right. But in my mind, like, I'd rather know, like, the realness. Like, I'd rather feel like I'm hanging out with us, you know?
Well, and
like, I want to feel like a fly on the wall.
Yeah. And that's actually what it feels like, is like, it could not be more relaxed and chill versus like a rigid, like, you know.
Yeah. But there is something weird about, like, I talk about this a decent bit on the podcast, so I don't need to get too deep into it, but, like, there's something weird about, like, we could have a conversation, but it might not be as good of a conversation or as productive of a conversation if we have that, like, underlying thing where we're like, oh crap, like, people are going to eventually listen to this.
Right.
So let's try to have it like a really productive conversation. Like, I'm not going to talk about my friend, or, you know, I'm not going to talk about, you know, something goofy or whatever. I mean, I will, but you know what I mean? I'm not going to be as, I don't know, just carefree. I'm trying to have a more intentional conversation and get to know the person rather than just kind of, you know, having a all over the place conversation. Right. But that's what I was going to say is, like, I made this video and I put it in Podcast Editors Club, and it was all about how I don't edit my podcasts. And it was so funny because the main intention of the video was to ruffle some feathers.
Oh,
I was trying to get some attention. I was trying to be a little bit, what's the word? Polarizing.
Yeah.
And I definitely ruffled some feathers in there. It was hilarious. People were like, well, you're just an amateur, and like, it was so
sit
funny.
Down.
It was really funny though.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. But anyways, that was just, yeah, because like you said, that you like the fact that, you know, we just get in here, press record, and we just kind of go for it.
Yeah. It's human. It's real. You know.
Yeah, and I almost want it to feel like it is live. You know what I mean? Like, some podcasts, they do it live where they're just live streaming or whatever. That's how I want to do, like, more live stream stuff. Yeah. So I kind of want to get into that vibe right now, because why would I edit my shit and then all of a sudden, like, expect that once I do it live it's going to be good?
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly. It's going to be a different show. I mean, you don't know. I think what you're doing is the right thing. It's really...
Thanks,
man.
I'm
having a lot of fun.
Thanks, man. Good. Well, cool. So let's get back to your story. So, working for Hans, and I was going to ask you, so Hans obviously has worked on tons of movie scores and all this stuff, but, like, before he was doing that, what did he do? Because, like, I'm not really, like, familiar. I actually heard of Hans the first time was when I was obsessed with The Dark Knight, because The Dark Knight was, like, my favorite movie. I love the score in that. I downloaded the soundtrack, and then that was when I first, like, heard of Hans Zimmer, because I was, you know, still kind of young. Yeah. And then funny enough, I mentioned the Simpsons movie, but it's funny because I loved the Simpsons movie. Yeah. And he did that one too. I'm like, whoa, who is this guy? He did the Batman movie and he did so random too. Like, both of those films are not anything alike. Yeah. And then I just kind of dove down his rabbit hole, and like you said, it literally would take, you know, hours to mention all of his credits, but...
Yeah, so I mean, he's got a really interesting background, which I'll talk about the stuff I do know about, because I don't want to misspeak on anything. But
yeah,
I mean, he's a musician. He you know, I don't know if anybody was a fan of, like, you know, pop bands and stuff in the '80s. There was a band called the Buggles. Which had a very famous song called "Video Killed the Radio Star."
Yes, I've heard that song.
Yeah, sure. Which I think was actually technically the first music video on MTV or something. Hans was the synth player for that. He was the keys man on it. So in the video, you can see him jamming away on
That's a fun fact. Yeah. I bet most people don't know that.
Yeah. So
that's funny.
You guys go on YouTube, look up that song, look at the music video, and you'll see him jamming away. I couldn't tell you all the specifics of how he got into film music. I think he worked on Deer Hunter with Robert De Niro and a couple other ones, and, you know, eventually, you know, moved out to LA and established his brand. But, you know, above being a composer, he's a producer. You know, I mean, and especially more recently, he's done all kinds of stuff that have stepped outside of just staying in that dark room. He's recently done several world tours of his music.
Wow.
With a full-on, almost like rock ensemble. He's had choirs and ensembles and, you know, bandmates go up playing just music from his 30, 40 years of his time in this industry. You know, he played at Coachella a couple years ago, which was really huge.
That's crazy.
He was trending on Twitter last year when he played, which was really interesting because he went out there.
I remember seeing him on the lineup.
Yeah, and people were like, "What the?" I had, like, all my friends to me. They're like, "Dude, your boss is doing a Coachella. What the?" And I was like, "Yeah, I guess so." And just Twitter was going crazy, like, oh my God, Lion King's playing right now, and my whole childhood is crying inside right now, and all this stuff. But
that's amazing.
Yeah, man. And then he and Pharrell Williams are like really good friends. They've worked together for years.
Wow.
He did all the string arrangements on Pharrell's Girl record that came out a couple years ago. And
that was a big one.
Yeah, and they work together on all kinds of stuff. So
Have you ever met Pharrell? Got to work with him?
I did briefly.
That's really
yeah.
cool.
I mean, he's exactly how you imagine, just the most humble, sweetest, kind-hearted man. Like,
That's
introduces
awesome.
himself to anybody in the room, just very gentle.
I've always gotten that vibe from him.
Yeah.
There's this one video that he did that I can't remember what it was exactly, but he was listening. He was at a school and was like listening to that. It went super viral of him like listening to that girl's song.
I can't remember the
that
song.
was so cool.
Yeah.
Like just seeing him like react to the music like that and like the girl's reaction and all that. Like he just seems like such a cool person.
Yeah, in the short conversation I had with him, it was really pleasant. Really, really cool cat.
That's awesome. I've always gotten and like the fact that he did the stuff with like Daft Punk and all that stuff recently, somewhat recently in regards to Daft Punk at least. But like I've always been a huge admirer of him.
Yeah,
that's really cool, man.
Yeah, that's cool.
But you said so Hans worked on the Girl record and
Yeah, and then like I said, he's been doing a lot of tours, and I think he did a 6-month world tour last year. Then he finally brought it to the States and did it all over the place. So he played out in Atlanta a couple times and last year, and he doesn't stop, man. It's really
awesome.
kind of cool and inspiring to see someone who at least in my opinion, I've always recognized him as this strong force and like such an inspiration. It's really cool that he's kind of expanded beyond that now, just within our own film community and film music and people who are obsessed with that. Like now you can be like, yeah, everybody knows who he is, and he's
broken
worked
into the
for it.
mainstream.
Yeah, and he's worked for it his entire life.
Because I couldn't really if you had to say name your favorite film composer, film score, Hans Zimmer's the only name that even really comes to mind at first, you know, and that's I was gonna say I know I've been getting tons of targeted ads on Facebook for these master classes.
Yeah.
And Hans Zimmer's master class popped up recently.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I've had some friends after have you taken that class? And I'm like, no, I'll just go talk to him. Right? It's a really douchey thing to say, but I'm like, no, man.
No, you work for it. Yeah. You don't need to take his master class. Yeah. That's funny. Yeah, the master class program seems really interesting though, because it is you literally get to learn from world class people.
Mm-hmm.
You want to learn how to do this, you might as well learn from the best. And that information is priceless. How do you learn about the theory of freaking basketball? Take Steph Curry's masterclass or whatever. Learning about writing, learning about horror writing. Learn from freaking the R.L. Stein, the Goosebumps guy, or whatever.
Yeah, I think what I really like about those is that they're they're not set up as this thing of you have to take this step and this step and this step to do, because I think what we were talking about earlier is just because I have met a handful of high profile celebrities and stuff, and I'm telling you, man, every interaction I've had with them could not be more pleasant and more humble. That's one thing I will say about Hans is he's a very, very, very humble person.
That's awesome.
I mean, just could not be more appreciative of everything that he's done and worked for and worked with the people, and it's that's even his thing too. I think he even says in the masterclass the first thing that I think of is I don't know how the hell I'm going to score your movie. And that's that's his truth, and I think that's up because we, especially when we look at these people who have reached a level that we strive towards, we think, well, a big part of it must be they were just born with this gift of whatever, not really understanding that that may be that there's a lot of talent there and gift, of course, but they also just work really, really hard and are open to learning and open to all these different ideas.
Yeah.
And it's really encouraging when you can kind of humanize that aspect of it, because it gives you hope that at one point you were just regular Joe Schmo like me down the street, and then you start falling into whatever groove it is you're falling into, and you just got to keep riding that wave, man.
Yeah.
That's kind of how LA is. I mean, there's so many people I know that have moved and will be there for a year, maybe 2, and then leave. There are people who have, especially if they're trying to get in the acting game, which is just unbelievably hard. I mean, from what I know. Yeah, it's not for everybody. It's hard. You are just constantly beaten down, and but you got to keep your head up and keep doing it. And, there's a lot of people I've met that have, just moved out there and they were a big shit in their tiny town in Oregon. So they're like, oh, of course I'm going to go to LA and kill it. And then they realize they go in an audition with a room of 15 other people who look exactly like them.
Yeah.
And like, it's crazy. So
it's pretty nuts. There's a guy that I watch on YouTube. He's my friend Austin introduced me to him, not personally, but he's this like Australian dude. His name is Matthew Hussey, and he's like this. He mainly like focuses on like it's interesting because I'm not his target audience, but it's like women's dating advice. Like he basically like breaks down like the male mind and like it gives like advice to women and stuff. He does all these like conferences and stuff. But one of the videos that recently that he was doing, he lives like part of the time he lives in LA, part of the time he lives somewhere else. But he did a thing in LA, and he was actually talking. He said like, I don't want to just come on stage and give generic information. He like hand selected like 5 or 6 ladies to like sit down with before the event that live in LA to talk to them about the dating scene in LA and all this stuff. And one thing that like stood out to me during that little conversation, he put it on YouTube, was that like LA. People always say like the dating scene is awful there, and it's blah blah blah, and you don't really know anybody, like your neighbors, you don't even talk to your neighbors, everyone's just doing their own thing, and like it's hard to even just like hang out with people. But one thing that he was saying is like the beautiful thing about LA is that literally it is like a conglomeration of all these people that were like the big shit in their town, and then so it's like and then moved there, so it's like almost like you kind of get the best of the best in some regards.
Yeah.
Like you literally get like people trying to figure out who the hell they are. You've got, and then you've got like in the contrast, you've got a huge like homeless community, and like it's pretty insane. Like that whole conglomeration of people there is really, really unique. But the thing that stood out to me was the fact that he was like, you've got all these people that were like big shit where they are, and they kind of outgrew their pond, and they needed to move out to LA because that's where the opportunities were and all that kind of stuff. So it is kind of like a cool place.
Yeah, and even kind of going beyond that, it's because I've been there for 6 years now, and I can attest to kind of the isolated feel of it.
Yeah.
It's spread out, it's big, and the majority of people who moved to LA moved there for a reason, for whatever career, or industry related or whatever. And unfortunately, we all tend to go there with our guards up. So it's definitely not a matter of people not being friendly, but people tend to be focused on their project, not realizing, like everybody else is doing the same thing, and maybe we can actually achieve something if we really work together.
Exactly.
And those are the ones who actually stick it out and last, because I have made some amazing, genuine, kind-hearted friends, people, collaborators that I have continued to work with and will continue to work with. There's such an easy blanket to put over, say, oh, LA's fake and people are all shady and only focused on self. Sure, there's a handful of people like that. There's a handful of people that in San Francisco, and New York, and Atlanta, and Chicago, and anywhere in the world you go. There's people like that everywhere.
Yeah.
It's just, I think when you find a common interest with people, because I can tell now, especially now that I've been working on these big projects and work for a very established composer name, it's very easy for me to tell when I'm meeting somebody. Because look, here's a common question you get in Los Angeles is, what do you do?
Yep.
Right? It's kind of shallow. It's kind of putting in a box, but it also kind of helps people to like.
Or like, what's your Instagram or whatever.
Or
like,
yeah, exactly. Like, oh yeah, what's your handle? But I can always tell now. It's easy to tell when people are actually wanting to know about you or who you are and like have a conversation, or when they're like, oh yeah, we should work together because. And I swear to God,
collab, bro.
Yeah, I'm telling you, man.
I'm just do something.
God, no. There's no reason to.
There's absolutely no reason for me to ever work with you.
Yeah. So it's
not personal. But it kind of is, but it's not.
But it is. Yeah, you suck as a person. That's as personal as it gets. But those are a lot fewer than you think.
Yeah.
There's really not. It's always easy to kind of pick those ones off. But
yeah. I kind of touched on this actually with a podcast. Like when I was in LA, I did a couple podcasts, and I kind of talked about this a little bit. Was I think it's just the sheer volume of people.
Yeah.
Like the feeling you get when you see someone or meet someone, like you have this like underlying feeling like I'm never going to see this person ever again.
Yeah.
So like the reciprocation of like being nice to that person, you almost feel like it's lost because you're like, why would I treat this person well if I'm never going to see them ever again in my fucking life, even though they might live right down the street. And like when you live in like the town that I went to school in, the college town, it was like really small.
Yeah.
And like I found that like when I was walking on the street and I passed somebody, like I would smile at them, not even like trying to necessarily like be nice, but it was like in the back of my head I knew like I'm probably going to see this person like tomorrow.
Right.
Even though I don't know them,
Yeah.
I'm probably going to see them.
Right.
You know, so I might as well like be nice to them because, you know, and it's like, I think there's some sort of, it's like somebody's number. It's like Dunbar's number or something like that. And it's this theory that like you can only have like 100 to 150 people in your life that you're like actually maintaining like a real relationship with.
Right.
And so like when you're in LA, like that's just like out the window.
Yeah.
You're like,
you're interacting with 150 people every day.
Why would I make space in my brain to try to remember this interaction when it's probably never going to amount to anything or whatever.
Yeah, and I think that's a pretty fair like tendency to, especially somebody who sees it and, you know, goes to
even
visit
in Atlanta though, like Atlanta's like a big city, you
Yeah.
know, like you get the same kind of vibes here on the street, like
Yeah.
you know, people aren't gonna, you kind of have that like whatever Southern hospitality that people always talk about, but you know, it's like for the most part, you're still gonna get those kind of same vibes on the street, but yeah, man. So I wanted to talk, of course, about your podcast.
Yeah,
and you were kind of
please.
saying that was like, you know, something that when you were working with Hans and you were working on your thing, like you were taking, number one, you were taking someone else's maybe instruments or someone else playing the guitar or whatever, recording them, turning it into something else, and then like giving it back to someone else to play. So it's almost like you're this middleman of exchanging sounds.
Yeah.
And so nothing was ever really like 100% your work because there's no like, you're like, you know, if you're trying to show someone like your portfolio or whatever, like look at all these sounds that I've created.
Right.
Like it's not like a finished product, so it's hard to showcase that.
Well, and that's the thing too, man, is it's, you know, it's
a tool that you're creating.
Yeah, it's, you know, I'm kind of like, I kind of get to assemble all these, like, this is the way I try to tell people how I do. If you look at Hans Zimmer, if you were to call him a painter, right, an artist, a painter, well, he has his canvas and he needs his colors. Now, he knows what colors he wants, and so he'll tell us what colors he wants. It's our job to get the colors and mix the paint and bring him new colors out of those colors that we make. So then we deliver to him, and then he can actually finally paint with them.
And the sample packs are like people that just paint with the colors right out of the box.
Right, exactly. They're the ones who are like, oh, Crayola, cool, fun, I'll use these ones.
Yeah, that's like my art teacher. She always said, like, never use the green out of the box. Never use the thing out of the box.
Green.
Make your own green, mix it. Don't use the stupid green.
Well, so...
She would actually take our green.
Oh, really?
She took the green, yeah. In our watercolor set, she would take out the green. She wanted us to make the own green. Because the green is the, like, one of the most common colors when you're, like, doing outdoor stuff or whatever. Because we'd go outside and paint or whatever.
Oh, okay.
And she'd always take our green.
So you got to find the right blue and the right yellow and then make your own.
Yeah,
okay.
maybe sometimes mix in a purple or something, you know?
Get a nice shine to it.
Anyway, sorry, not to get on the color rabbit hole, but that makes a lot of sense. It resonates.
Yeah, so you know... while I'm the one who will record the musician is the one who's playing their instrument. The sound is what we're after. We're getting all these different articulations and whatever. So I take it and I take their essence and then I reconstruct it into software and then Hans will play it, right? Sometimes Hans himself will do a mix. So he'll send us the samples back after he's processed the sounds to make them bigger, you know, smaller, whatever, cleaner, dirtier, whatever effects he wants to throw on it. And then we'll kind of rebuild, send it back to him. Then... you know, it'll go through his mixer who mixes the score, and then it'll go to the dub station. I mean, so by the end of the day, it goes through a lot of hands. As this project, that's just how these big projects work. It's a huge collaboration. I mean, that's literally what it is. You're working with so many people.
That's what a movie or any kind of big production is. It's just a giant, like, team effort.
Right. And it's really, really cool and awesome because at the end of the day, you're working for the project. Everybody's working for the project. You know, of course, I'm doing everything I can to make sure that Hans is happy and giving him what he wants. but he makes it very clear, like, hey, I know I'm asking for this, but I'm asking for this because the director's asking for this and the producer's asking for this, and like, this is for the project. How can we make this project the best that it can be? Which is really cool. But as you're saying before, as far as portfolio goes, I can tell people, yeah, if you go watch Man of Steel, you hear those guitar, screams, those slides, or those percussive lines. Yeah, I kind of programmed those sort of, but they also went through a lot of other things. And, for me, after being there for almost 6 years now, I was thinking, man, I really want to start taking all these skills that I've learned in my engineering and producing and mixing and editing and kind of put myself to the test. I was like, okay, well, how can I do this? And I thought, okay, well, I'm not a filmmaker, but I love films, and I still have been scoring my own personal projects on the side, like, indie films and, college projects and student films.
Yeah.
But I was sitting around with my roommate one day. This was like 3 years ago. And we were doing that typical artist thing and just sitting around feeling sorry for ourselves that nobody was making our dreams come true on our own front end.
Why isn't anyone approaching me for this thing?
Seriously, God. Because even though I
Don't they see my creative genius
God.
emanating from my very being?
Do they not feel my presence, my genius, my genii just floating about? Because even though all the work I do at the studio, I still like writing music, and I wanted to still be a film composer. And sitting around with my roommate who's an actor, and he wasn't going out on as many auditions as he was hoping to. And I'm like, yeah, man, I'm not getting as many projects to score. We're just sitting there just like, man. So finally we stopped. We're like, wait a second. What if we made our own project? Fuck, can we do that? Are we allowed to do that? Screw it, let's do it. We live in a house. We have creators who live with us. We have a director roommate. We have a writer roommate. I mean, we've got all these people. Why don't we do our own thing? And that's how it started. I was like, okay, well, do we do a web series? Do we do this? And at the time, I had a friend who introduced me into podcasting like a few years ago. And I was really just started getting into it. Loved, the big NPR shows and like This American Life, Radio Lab TED, and Radio, Hour, all these other ones. I was like, okay, these are really cool. And what I really liked about those is the way that they told the storytelling aspect of it.
Yeah.
With the music and the editing, it just felt really cool. I'm like, man.
It's very polished.
Yeah.
Very high quality.
Yeah. I feel like
unlike this show. Sorry, guys.
It's all rugged and rogue, but there's
what
this
if
charm to it.
Well, actually, afterwards, I was going to ask you to write a score for this podcast.
Oh, dude, I'll do it. We'll have our own theme song, man. We'll make it all big and explosions and shit. Don't worry. I'll glam it up for you. So it all started with me listening to those, and I was like, okay, these were really cool, but these are all nonfiction, and I'm glad to learn and listen to all this stuff. But at the same time, I was like, where are all the fiction podcasts? Where are all the fun, like, storytelling ones, the nonfiction ones, or the fiction ones, the ones that are like, I want an experience. I want to get lost in a story. And I found a small handful of ones of these audio dramas, and I was like, wow, these are really cool. Some of these are really well done. Some of the acting's really cool. It's like, but man, I feel like there's some stories out there that haven't been told yet. And I was like, well, I was thinking about telling my own story, or at least working on a project that I can start writing music to. So why don't I just do my own? And I talked to Aaron, my roommate, and said, dude, what if we started our own podcast, our own fiction podcast? And he's like, okay, well, how are we going to do it? I'm like, well, we can just record at the house, and I've got my engineering background now. I know how to edit and clean audio really well, and I write music, so we got that part covered. We just need actors. And he's like, well, I'm an actor. I'm in like 10 acting classes. I know a lot of people. Let's bring people together. My sister's an actor. A lot of my really good friends are actors. And I was like, fuck, this is that time. I guess this is what we got to do. So I wrote a script after trying to pawn it off to a bunch of my writer friends, being like, hey guys, I want to write music to a story, and here's kind of the idea. Can you write the story? And they're like, nah, bro, you got to do it. And I'm like, I'm not a writer. And like, I told them I'm not a writer. I never wrote, my writing's with music. It's not with words, unless it's in a song. And so I just said, okay, well, I guess I have to do it. So I challenged myself to do something completely out of my comfort zone, starting with writing the story and then going and casting the actors and doing the sound design. I'm like, well, I don't know much about sound design, but I'm going to have to learn. Even with the music aspect, how do I add my own tones to this, my own textures, my own colors, my own samples, and that's how it started back in I think I started kind of production of my podcast in January of 2017. And then we launched in August, and we've been getting some pretty decent reception, man. It's been pretty good.
That's awesome. So when you set out to write the story, how did you like write it? Because that's always the thing I've always been super confused about writing. So when I was a kid, I always pictured, okay, this is an author. And for whatever reason, I always pictured them writing it on paper.
Yeah.
Like an author, like sitting down, writing it on paper, and then having someone transcribe it like into like typing it eventually, and then printing it into a book. And then as I got older, I realized like, oh, people probably just type it. They don't probably like write it anymore.
Yeah.
You know, or like maybe like back in the day, typewriters or whatever.
Right.
And then I've even more recently, I realized that a lot of people that are like kind of not necessarily authors, but they're like influential people that write a book, they just kind of like talk with an author, and then the author kind of like transcribes what they're saying and turns that into a book.
Right.
And so I've always been like, well, what is a book? Like, what do you have to be an author? Can you just talk and like someone writes what you're saying? I guess that makes sense, right? Because that's words in your head like coming out. So yeah, like, you know, I've always been curious as to like how people like go about that process. Like, were you just sitting down in Microsoft Word and typing it out?
I'm telling you, man, here's one of the nice things, because I have zero training in writing. I didn't know anything about. I still don't know anything about it, but the kind of beauty in that is I could kind of do whatever the hell I wanted to.
Yeah, whatever made the most sense.
Yeah, so, you know, I just quickly learned, because I wanted to write this show. It's called Rose Drive. I realize I haven't even said that yet. Rose Drive is the name of the podcast, and it's a fiction podcast, audio drama, murder, mystery, neo-noir type of thing. I'll get more into details of that later. But as far as the writing process goes, I was like, okay, well, I want to create something that's not just like two people talking into a microphone and then throwing sound effects. I really want to put people into this world and treat it like a series, like a TV series. So how do I create this environment? And it happens in the writing. So I was like, okay, well, I need to write this like it's a TV series. So I asked friends who have written TV series or wanted to, and I Googled stuff, and, you know, started downloading apps and Final Draft and all these other programs to kind of see like how screenplays and scripts are structured and what everything means. And that's even how I write it. Everything's written with action points, as if, you know, like you could film it if you really wanted to. But
that's how it should feel.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you should feel like you're watching it in your head.
Yeah.
Like that's what when I was younger, I used to listen to this like audio series with my family called Adventures in Odyssey.
Oh, cool.
And it was like a fictional. It was like based on it was like a Christian show. Uh-huh. But everything I always like tied back to like a Bible story or something. But like the show was very visual. Like you could picture what was happening in your head. So you're on a road trip or whatever, you're listening to it, and it's funny because like on the cover of the CDs, they would have pictures of the characters, like cartoon pictures of the characters, and they never looked anything like how I pictured them in my head originally. Right. Because when you're watching in the show, you get this idea of how they look, and then you see the actors in person, or you see what they like, whoever created it had in mind, and you're like, whoa, that's nothing like what I thought. Right,
and that's kind of the fun of it. I mean, even just reading books, right? Because I know when I'm reading books, I always designate certain voices for each character, and like. It's kind of fun because you get to have your imagination. And that's what's really fun about doing these shows, is writing the shows. You don't have that element, the visual element, right?
Which you can use to your advantage.
Which you use to your advantage because it creates a limitation that forces you to be creative in a way you never thought that you would be. And you really have to find a way, how do I tell this story? How do I show this story without being so exposition heavy, which guilty I have been on some parts where, you know, I have my leads sometimes be a little too descriptive of what's going on, but I think it works for my show, at least. Here's me making an excuse for it. I think it works for the show because it is a noir, and you know especially
with like murder mystery kind of stuff. You're trying to like solve it, so you kind of want to know those like details,
right? And you know, setting it up in a way, like one of the things I do with Rose Drive is having, you know, a conversation no different than you and I are having right now, while simultaneously having this internal monologue that goes on for each of the characters. So, you know.
Which is kind of more like a book, because that's
Right.
one thing that a lot of movies don't do very well.
Yeah.
Like, for example, like the Hunger Games, I read those books, and like the whole book, the books are all told from a first person of Katniss, and then the movies are all third person, and so you lose that whole internal
interesting.
monologue.
Yeah.
Like, you lose the whole like debate of what she's thinking the whole time. I'm like, this is, I mean, it was a good movie, but it was like you lose this like a whole element of the story completely.
Yeah.
And that's really cool that you've introduced that into your show, because I think that's super important. Like, getting into someone's head is like really cool.
Well, and it's just, you know, I think I try to keep it more realistic in the sense that, I mean, look, we all have a filter that stuff goes through our head and things come out. Certain words come out, certain things don't. And that's kind of what I wanted to do with this, while you're having these conversations with people of, you know, telling them what may be truthful but not as raw as kind of what's going on in your mind. And especially since this is a murder mystery type of show, you know, when we're watching TV shows, we're watching movies, we basically have to accept that whatever the character is doing on screen is their truth. Right? Unless it's written in a way that, you know, presents them to be really sketchy. But for the most part, you know, if you watch two characters walk up to each other, hi, I'm Jonathan, hi, I'm Carla. In my mind, you're Jonathan and you're Carla. I have no reason to doubt you.
And that's what good acting really is.
Yeah, exactly. And
it's effortless.
And that's one of the things, too, why I wanted to make sure that I cast the people that I work with are professional actors and people who are in the industry, working in it, you know, wanting to, you know, excel and exceed beyond. And the really cool thing, which I will say, is none of my actors, except for maybe 3 or 4, I have a cast of like 25 or 30 people at this point. Yeah, it's pretty big. Maybe 3 or 4 of them actually had voiceover training.
Wow.
Everybody else was brand new to them, and they killed it. They all did such a good job. And
voiceover acting is super interesting, because that was like, you know, because you can kind of do a weird voice that's not necessarily your thing, but like, since there's no visual element, sometimes you can't really tell that that's not their normal voice or whatever.
Right.
And like, you sometimes, like, when you watch videos of people doing voiceover, they actually are kind of acting out what they're doing, because it actually helps portray like what's happening. You're not actually just like talking into the thing.
Well, and that's what's really fun. That's why this medium is such a blend of theater and film in a way, because it's written like a film, and the acting is more or less like a film. But even then, the actors who don't have that visual, you know, environment for them to show their emotions or what they feel like, they have to show it with their words. So there's times where, you know, they get, you know, you have to be a little bit bigger than you would be on screen.
Exactly.
Kind of bigger like you would be on stage. And it's fun, you know, and especially for a lot of my actors who do a lot of commercial work and do a lot of TV and whatever, who go on set, have, you know, a small handful of lines and are there for the whole day. I'm like, I'm going to give you guys pages, monologues, like, you guys get to act, you get to really invest in these characters and bring them to light in a way that you may not have an opportunity in other worlds where you're playing, you know, you're playing this character, you say 5 lines and then that's it. Because my show is very character driven. Those are the most interesting stories to me by far, are shows that focus on characters and relationships. The plot obviously has to be interesting, but, you know, it's for me, it's all about that relatability. And having characters that can rope you in and are so different. And, you know, because when I'm watching TV shows, and I always have this conversation with my friends, you know, when I'm really getting invested into it, as people, we like to have some sort of like empathetic relationship with others and have a connection. So it's very common to be like, oh, well, which character do you identify with the most? You know, like, Team Edward or Team Jacob?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, like, yeah, and that's like, even to go back to the Hunger Games, like, that's, I felt like I lost that with the movies.
Oh, okay.
Because in the book, you do get that, like, kind of team thing. Like, you feel like you're empathetic with, you know, the characters, and in the movies, you kind of, like, lose that a little bit because you're not in their head.
Right.
You don't really know what they're thinking.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, and that's exactly right. And I actually wanted to use this as a way to challenge my sound design skills. Like, how can I have kind of 3 conversations going on at once without making you want to, like, take the headphones off?
Well, the thing that I was going to bring up that earlier is that, like, people, so when like even big time like movie buffs or people that love movies, I think the biggest thing that people underestimate is the sound design in movies, because it's the thing you don't see.
Right.
You literally are hearing it. And the more that I've kind of, even with what little sound design I have to do for this podcast, or even just putting thought into it, and recently I've been doing more like video editing and stuff like that, like the thing that separates good videos from bad videos is more often than not a good sound. Like, you watch like a YouTube video of somebody and this, there's a bunch of, white noise in the background and crackling and the audio is bad. Ugh. Immediately, it doesn't matter how crisp the image is, immediately you want to turn it off because you're like, this is amateur as fuck. Like, this is so bad. I don't even want to listen to this. But someone that's taking the time to clean up their audio, or, even just make the environment they're recording in a little bit more effective or whatever. Because I talked to this guy, his name is Jason. I can't talk to him. Like Jason, Hunger Games with Jason. Jason Shepard. No, Jason Shepard, and he runs a flight school, like an online flight academy that helps prepare people for the tests you have to take when you become a pilot.
Oh shit.
And so he does tons of video, and I asked him, I said, what's the biggest thing that people underestimate when it comes to video? And he said, having good sound. He's like, it does not matter how good your image is, because chances are whatever camera you have is good enough. The sound, invest in your sound, because that's the thing that you can't escape. If you look away from the video for a second to do something, the sound is the one constant. You can't turn off your hearing. You can close your eyes, you can look away, but you can't tell your brain not to hear, which is a weird thing, right? And that's a good thing, because like when we're asleep, it's like the thing that wakes us up, or the thing that, whatever, but it's that one sense that you can't really escape.
I could literally we could do a whole other podcast on sound design and everything
in
you touched
theory,
on.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my God. What I will say is 100% I agree with you, because here's the truth. People will forgive shitty acting, shitty film quality, whatever. But you're right. If the sound is not right, and it's something people don't even always consciously, I'm always hyper aware of it, because
I'm more aware of it now.
Yeah, because that's what my ears are trained to do. I'm always constantly thinking about sound, and and just the idea of we'll fix it in post is just like so upsetting, because I take a lot of pride in what I do and my work, and the reason why my production is pretty good is because I take that time to make sure my source audio is clean and good to go. And the one thing that I wanted to make sure that, for better or worse of whether people listen to Rose Drive or not, or enjoy the story or not, that the production is going to be good, and that you never have to once touch that volume knob. Because I cannot tell you, Andrew, how many times I've listened to shows, whether it's audio dramas or talk shows or whatever, I'm constantly riding that fader, that knob, because people haven't mixed it right, or there's constantly like peaks and people are doing this, and it's just like, this is a chore for me. You're talking really quietly once, and then you're yelling in the next, and like my ears are being blown out.
Yeah.
And that happens a lot in amateur kind of more like podcasts and audio dramas. But that was something I for sure was like, this is not going to have that. I'm going to mix this at least to a point where I'd much rather have everything be a little bit quieter and have you have to crank it than you have to constantly going up and down and down. Because, we also live in a world of like, especially now with like hip hop and dance music and EDM, where people are very, like producers are very much, how can I get this sumbitch as loud as possible? And for me, that's not always the most interesting. My shit you don't need to have it at volume 3 and it's blowing your ears off. I don't need that. I just want something that's consistent, that's going to be true across the board. It's like I said, you hit play, just no different when you watch a movie at the theaters. You're not having to do this all the time. You can sit there and enjoy it, and you're good to go.
That would be weird if in the theater you're constantly having to like plug your ears. Yeah. Then that, like, again, it's something that people take for granted. It's something that people don't think about.
Yeah.
Because like when you're listening to the radio, you get that clean, consistent volume level most of the time. When you're listening to songs that are professionally mastered, you're not having to touch that volume knob. But then let's say you download a song from a sketchy downloader on YouTube. Right. You have that one song in your playlist that's quieter than all the others, and then the next one is way loud.
Blows your face off.
And that's one thing that, talking to new podcasters and all that stuff, like that was something that I knew, because I think when you dive into something new, you should always kind of be a fan of that thing, at least a little bit.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing I see that's a mistake of a lot of people that are like falling into this podcast trend is that they're not actual podcast listeners themselves.
Right.
And so they don't even know what they like, and they also don't know what they don't like. And listening to amateur podcasts really helps me because I can, I pride myself on doing the best I can. I'm not taking it, I'm not going back and editing out and adding in sound effects or, anything, because that's just not my show.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like, I do want it to, be that consistent, like, level. I want it to sound good. I don't want there to be white noise in the background, all those different things. So I do take pride in care in that. But, I think that a lot of people, they when they go into something like that, they're like, oh, all I got to do is spend a good amount of money on my microphone and I'll be set.
I'll get my Blue Yeti mic and I'm good to go. Yeah. God.
Or the Blue Snowball.
The Blue Snowball. Yeah, that one's even better. Jeez.
The Blue Yeti mic is kind of interesting because it's not a bad mic, but yeah.
Sorry, that's my snobbery coming out. I'm like, please. Yeah, no.
Talk to me in 10 years when you get something more worthy.
Something more worthy of my time.
This USB bullshit. How could you possibly be
This USB bullshit.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. So, but I mean, as far as the microphone that's built into your laptop versus a Blue Yeti, you're going to get better quality. But
Right.
I think the biggest mistake that people make is that they still record in terrible environments, or they record in, even this room's not the best environment, but at least we've got some carpet and some furniture to absorb some sound. There's little echo in here. But I think a lot of people, they're just like, they're not even tuning their ears to listen to that echo, or turning off the AC, or like recording right next to their refrigerator or something that's humming in the background. Little things like that are the things that people subconsciously pick up on when they're listening to something quote unquote amateur, and they might not even be able to place why it sounds amateur.
Right.
But those are the things that make it sound bad.
Yeah, and that was the one thing for Rose Drive. I was like, say what you will about it, but I want to make sure that the production is
no
good.
one can say that the production is bad, man.
I appreciate that, man.
I would say mission accomplished there, man.
Thank you.
It's really, really good.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
So to go back for a little bit, to go back to the writing, so to give people that haven't listened to, give us kind of like a synopsis of
Sure.
of the storyline. What's it about? People are probably a little curious.
Yeah, sure. So Rose Drive is a current set piece. It's not a period piece, and it focuses on the life of a young man by the name of Marcus Hill, played by Aaron Cavett.
He's really talented, by the way.
Oh, he's fantastic.
Is that your roommate?
Yeah, he's my roommate. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna say you chose the right guy for that, man. Like his internal monologue, his consistency, and everything across all the episodes, like really, really good.
I will definitely. Well, I'm sure he's gonna listen to this. So
good.
Cool. So yeah, dude.
He's really talented.
So his character Marcus returns to his hometown of Southampton, which is a sleepy little waterfront suburb up in the Bay Area of Northern California. Which is loosely based off of my hometown, which I will not say the name of it, but people will know it. So we'll get into that in a second. So he returns to his hometown after being gone for 10 years, having just missed his 10-year high school reunion. And he just needed to reset. He had a really rough couple of years in New York, wanted to come home to unwind and recharge, and his parents, he learned, have decided to move up to Oregon. So he comes home and is basically helping pack up the rest of the boxes. And driving around town, trying to avoid people, is not the most social of people, as you've learned.
Yes.
He's pretty much keeps to himself, kind of an outcast. He's at the pharmacy picking up medication for his headaches, and overhears a conversation of two girls who had just went to the reunion recently, and were talking about the return of somebody who had returned to the reunion that everybody thought was gone and dead. And he instantly knows who this is. It's a young man by the name of Forrest Sutherland, played by Max Lloyd-Jones. Forrest, senior year of high school, did something to Marcus and his family that just destroyed their lives and changed everything from that point on. And when that happened, Forrest disappeared. Nobody's heard from him again. Marcus, who has spent many years trying to get away from this, thinking Forrest is gone, whatever, trying to move on with his life, finds out he's back in town, so he's like, I'm going to make this guy pay for what he did. But I have no idea how to find him. and through a series of doing research and looking at the reunion, finds out that Forrest was at the reunion talking to 7 of his former classmates. Thinks, well, he was talking to them in these pictures. Think they're my closest link to finding him. So he decides to individually interview each person to try to find where Forrest is and how he can, have his little reunion himself with Forrest. Unbeknownst to the interviewees, they think, he just wants to meet up with his friend, but he has definitely an ulterior motive. So each episode is this intimate, as I was talking before, one-on-one conversation with a different character, someone from Marcus's past, someone that went to high school with him, all in hopes to find this person, Forrest, who ruined his life, and so he can kind of seek his revenge.
Yeah.
So on that front, it's a pretty, easy listen, but there's a lot of stuff, as you can attest to, as you can listen to a few episodes. Mm-hmm. It starts taking some pretty interesting twists and turns that go beyond just the, I gotta find this guy. See, this guy ruined my family, man. Goes beyond that classic cop stuff.
My family, see.
And we definitely start going into some pretty interesting territories the further you get into.
I was gonna say, and I also like the appreciation, like you said, it's like modern times. Mm-hmm. Like there are like different things that like you get that vibe from. Like I remember in the first, I can't remember which episode it was. It was in the earlier ones, but. He talked to the kind of like stoner dude, mm-hmm. and like you could get like the conversations you had were like, oh, okay, I know somebody like that guy.
Exactly.
Like we all know somebody like that guy who's kind of like the stoner guy.
We all have that guy in our life. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So I appreciated that. Just like those little things.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, I need to catch up. I think I listened to probably like. I got probably like the 5th or 6th one.
Yeah.
I need to go back and listen.
Well, the good thing now is the first 15 episodes are out. So
is that like season 1 or what?
More or less, yeah.
Gotcha.
Season 1 isn't quite done yet.
Gotcha.
Which a lot of my fans think they are. A lot of our fans think that they are. That it is, because it ends on a pretty big cliffhanger. But it would actually be really shitty if that was the end of the first season because of how it ends. And that's all I'm going to say about it, because I don't want to be the one who ruins my own show for people that
right.
that try to check it out. But it's.
Snape kills Dumbledore.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, man. Sidebar, just because I love going on tangents. I went to see Dark Knight when it came out years ago, 2008 or whatever it was. And we were waiting in line, in a long line, and it was a midnight IMAX showing. And I did it too. I was with my girlfriend, and this guy drives by in his truck in this huge line. Everybody decked out, dressed as Joker and Batman, whatever. This guy rolls down the window in his truck, and he looks over and he goes, "Hey, you guys in line to see The Dark Knight?" Because, I guess he must have seen an early screening or something, and everybody gave him this look like, I swear to God, if you ruin this, like, all the fanboys just were like, instantly turned to aggression and were like, yes. And he goes, "Dumbledore dies," and drives off. It was the funniest thing, and we all started cracking up because we're like, this guy had an opportunity to ruin lives right now by ruining it.
That's amazing.
Back on track. Yeah. So the first 15 episodes are out. Perfect time, I think, for everybody to binge if they want to.
Yeah.
Because it is a show, I was releasing it weekly, which was killing me because it's a lot that goes into it for 20 minutes, man.
Dude, releasing this show weekly sometimes is a struggle. Dude, yeah. I can only imagine the level that you're having to do. And working with multiple actors and piecing it all together. Yeah.
All this as my side job while I am working at the studio in Santa Monica. I'm doing all this stuff at my house. So it's like I kind of have these two worlds colliding. So... yeah. But so now's kind of a good time to jump in if you wanted to, because you can just binge away the first 15 episodes, and each episode's roughly like 20 to 30 minutes, with a couple of them being a little bit shorter. But it's been a fun ride so far, and we've been taking off so much. I was just telling you before. I'll plug this in right here. We got asked to go to Potter and Love, which is a podcast convention in New Orleans, August 10th through 12th. So if anybody in that area, let me know. I can probably hook you up with a discount code for it.
I was gonna say I might have to hit it up just because I'm in that world, man.
Dude, I'm really excited for it. It's a completely independently run show. It's their phrase. I'm gonna screw this up, but I believe it's podcast listeners for listeners by listeners. I'm part of the Facebook group, I think you are as well, that has like 18,000 members from all around the world that people just jump in and want to be a part of the conversation and suggest podcasts. There's actually more people I find there that are looking for shows rather than people who are just promoting their own, which is really, really cool.
That's good for a community because it can get real toxic when everyone's just promoting their own shit.
Exactly, yeah.
Especially because like that's one thing that I think a lot of podcasters go wrong is that they're promoting their show to the wrong audience. Like they're promoting their show to other podcast producers and stuff. Like, I need to get in buddy with all these podcast guys. It's like, dude, they're not your audience.
Right.
Like they're making their own shit. Like they're making their own thing. Like granted, probably a lot of these people are listening to other podcasts, but there's a limit to how many you can actually listen to.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Like and that's why like, you know, for years like I listened to like the first 5 or 6 episodes, but then like there was other things that popped up and I was like, oh yeah, this new one or whatever, and then I just never got back to it or whatever. And that happens all the time.
Right.
With people in this space, but there's other people that are like your hardcore fans that like you're one of their go-to shows. Like every week they're waiting for a new thing or whatever.
Yeah, and that's what's really kind of beautiful about it. It's like finding, you know, I know we were kind of joking about this earlier, but like, you know, the hardest people to get to listen to your podcast are your friends.
Yeah.
But that's kind of a beautiful thing because I don't want to create something that's just my friends and family.
No.
So I want to create something that hopefully can touch and reach other people.
But I think there's something to be said about that because at the end of the day, like, you know, most of your friends and stuff, like, they don't know like even really exactly what you do for work or like, you know, they might not even exactly know what you do on a daily basis or, you know, like, but they're your friends. And so like friends are friends. And that's kind of one thing that's interesting about my show is that it is kind of like a mixture of like my friends plus like this passion that I have to do this. So like, I always really appreciate it when my friends tell me they have listened to it because I know that like, wow, that's really cool that you even like took the time. Because I do know like, it is kind of a time suck sometimes. Granted, podcasts are not the same type of time suck as watching a YouTube video is because you can do it passively.
Right.
But even just taking the time, like, because there's literally millions of other pieces of content you could be absorbing, and like the fact that you like even took an hour or whatever to listen to my thing is like, that's really cool.
Well,
I never take that for granted. At least I try not to.
I at least admire your structures because like at least what I do with my fiction product, with my audio dramas, it's controlled, it's all ready to go. I can, you know, I'm the one who does it, I cast, I do all that and I set it out. But I can imagine like, you know, especially once I tell people I don't have like a talk show podcast or something, but I have had friends, and I'm sure you've probably dealt with this, where you meet people like, oh, you have a podcast? Well, if you ever need somebody, like, I can be a good guest for you if you needed it. And I'm like,
all the time.
God, man, I can't, that would frustrate the hell out of me. If you could just have people being like, I would be great for your show. I get pissed off when I'm
sure it probably happens more in LA.
Yeah, I've had it a lot actually when I was casting because like I said, I go through Actors Access and Breakdown Express because I like to hire professionally and people like actually send in reels and headshots.
That's cool.
But I've had some people that, you know, and this is me, this is for my stupid little show, this isn't like a big thing, but still.
But it is, like, it's a high quality production though.
Well, thank you. But this is kind of the point I'm making is like, if you can't even treat this more like professionally wanting to like get the gig, man, I can see why you're struggling out there. Because I've had people that will send me a message saying, hey, this is the character, I'd love to audition for it, I think I'd be great, blah, blah, blah. And all they send me is a headshot. I'm like,
this is an audio show.
I'm like, I put that podcast. I'm like, you don't have to have a voiceover reel. Send me whatever, just as long as I can hear your voice. And I have people that'll send me reels that are like 5 minutes long, and the first minute is like slideshows of their faces and different looks with the EDM track in the background. I'm like, bro, I'm not gonna waste my time on this. I got like 400 submissions coming and I gotta look at, like, you know, but it's one of those things I'm instantly turned off when you're telling me that you're right for my show, and I'm like, you don't get out of here, man.
Yeah,
just stop.
It's kind of gross. Like, and the other thing, so this is like part of my vetting process that I think is like almost unintentional, but I think subconsciously I knew it, was that all of them are in person.
Yeah,
so,
of course.
So all of them are in person. So if someone just wants that quick, easy, like, I'm going to take advantage of this guy's audience real fast and like get my word out.
Right.
They've got to put in some effort too.
Yeah.
Whether it's to meet me, whether it's to me to go over to their place and they maybe have to clean their room or whatever,
right.
you know, like whatever it ends up being. like, and we're gonna get a little bit more like intimate than me just calling you on Skype and recording for 30 minutes.
Yeah, I don't like that, man. I'm not down with that.
I've never been down with it. I've always, whenever I listen to them, if it's a podcast where I'm like specifically like there to like learn a thing, or like maybe, okay, you know, I don't know if you're familiar with Tim Ferriss's podcast.
Yeah.
So he's a really big podcast, and a lot of them he does over Skype, but like a lot of the time it's because these people are really hard to access. Like,
Sure,
you know, like
sure.
he's talking to Arnold Schwarzenegger. So
Right.
like, I can understand, like, that guy is one of the guests that I would be down to listen to him talk over Skype.
Yeah,
because
sure.
it's good enough. It's an interesting enough person that I'm down for that.
Right.
And that's what I've always said about my show. It's like if Barack Obama hit me up and wanted to be on my show, but he could only do it on Skype, of course I would do it.
Right.
But like if it's some real estate agent in Ohio that wants to be on my show,
Like,
and literally I've had that, and I'm like, dude, number one, you probably haven't even listened to my show. You probably just found me on Instagram, and you're like, oh, an avenue where I can talk about my thing.
yeah.
Fuck off. You
Yeah.
know, like seriously. You know, and I take myself too seriously for that. You know?
Well, no, but there's something to be said, and this is how I'm going to try to relate this and say at least what I do with my show with the acting is I hate doing remote sessions. I like almost strongly refuse to do it. There's a small handful of times I've done it because I have some really good friends who are actors who live all over the place, and I was like, I want to get this involved. And but
Meaning remote sessions, like they're recording in their studio
somewhere
thing.
else,
Yeah.
and then I'm taking that and cutting it in because for one, it's damn impossible, nearly impossible. I don't have the skills yet to record character A in my studio at home and character B in a barn in Alaska or something, and like try to convince you that they're on the streets of Paris together.
Yeah. That's difficult to do dialogue.
Right, but beyond
Like
that, and this is exactly true for what's happening right now, there's a chemistry of actually working with somebody in person and like having a conversation with you here, flying out. Like, this was well worth the trip to come out to meet you and, you know, in person and do all this stuff live. Like, I was stoked about it. I was like, hell yeah, I'm glad that this dude's not like, yeah, let's just do it over Skype, because it's just mundane and like not as much fun. I mean, I have done them in the past, and fortunately the people I've done those Skype conversations with have been people that I get along with super well, and there's an instant click, and it's like, okay,
good.
now we have to actually meet up in person.
But there's nuances that you don't get.
Right, yeah.
And you have to, there's like that slight latency where you might interrupt them, and you're like, oh no, go ahead or whatever. And people that are listening, it relates back to what you were saying. It's like, oh, we'll fix it in post.
Right.
It's like, make the bulk, the meat, whatever, as good as it can get, and fix what's only absolutely necessary.
Right.
If we're trying to get together and have the most productive conversation we can have, I'm going to put as much effort into getting with that person as possible, so we can have an in-person thing. And even just like I realized in the beginning, in my first few episodes, I would always be constantly saying like, you know, because that's something that you do when you're talking with someone. You want to reaffirm that you are agreeing with what they're saying or whatever. But now I realize that I can sit here and just nod and look you in the eyes, and it's the same exact thing. And I don't have to say the because like, you know, because I'm listening to it, I'm like, what am I doing over here? Like, am I playing the freaking like harmonica, like humming away over here? Like, what's going on?
And that's something that's something you probably wouldn't have learned to like control if you were like in that the editing group where you're saying where someone can just take that out for you.
Yeah.
You know, you actually learn how to speak like a human. You know what I mean? In person.
That's what I said to this guy. I said. He was like, well, these people use all these crutch words and stuff. I'm like, okay, cool. If I ever meet you on the street and you say like, I'm walking away. Because that's not how people talk. People use crutch words. People say like. People say It's not a bad thing. Yeah, we probably do it way more than we should, but there's reasons for that.
Yeah.
Even the like Google Assistant AI, that video that's been trending everywhere of the Google thing calling the hair salon. Have you seen that?
No.
So there's this new thing. I'm a nerd, so I'm in that world. So I'm always like in with whatever the new technologies. But so Google had this event called Google I/O, which is a conference for their developers. One of the technologies they showed off was this thing called Google Dexa or something like that. I don't know. But basically the theory is that the Google Assistant, you can eventually be like, hey, make me a hair appointment at 10. And in the background, Google Assistant will call the hair salon, act like a person, schedule it out, and then put it on your calendar or whatever. And the creepiest part is that they were showing real conversation with the Google Assistant. And the way that the Google Assistant was talking on the phone, mimicking real voices, it was saying, it was saying, yeah, that should work, things like that. Because those are things that we do when we're speaking. It's amazing, but like, that's how we communicate. Yeah. We don't always just go, yes, that sounds great.
Yeah.
I'll put it on my calendar. Like, that sounds super fake.
Yeah.
But if you're like, oh yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, I'll put it on my calendar. The extra yeah in there wasn't necessary. Those weren't necessary, but those are things that we have in our vernacular that make it sound more real.
Yeah.
And so that's one thing that I in the beginning of my intros that I do for my podcast, I always script them out, but I always try to put in, I'm probably going to say, instead of why don't you, I'm going to say like, why don't ya, or things like
just
that, like what do you, instead of what are you, like just putting those little things in there to help me so that I don't sound so robotic, because I know that's how I would actually talk,
Yeah, and it's I even try to do that again with Rose Drive of
I'm sure,
of having the dialogue be as conversational as possible, because that's what's interesting to me. That's what's real to me. Now there's a lot of embellishments and flourishes and little things that I put in there too, but I even tell all my actors, I'm like, look, if these words are not coming out right, make them your own. Don't change the meaning, just make them your own. I'm okay if you change things around a little bit, because I don't want it to sound scripted, and it's hard writing dialogue that's supposed to not sound like it's written. And that's what the best writers try to do. I'm not saying I'm that, because I haven't succeeded in that quite yet, but that's why I leave it up to my actors, and that's when they come in and they take the words off the page and they put their own spin on it. And I mean, I've had times with my actors too, because I'm writing everything. So of all my characters, and you've listened to a few of them, a lot of them are really different from each other. I'm using different parts of my brain to try to sketch out this person.
Yeah, or like maybe imitating someone like how would this person talk or whatever.
Andrew, I look insane when I'm writing, because I'm just sitting there arguing with myself. Like, I'll have one character say something, I'll have Marcus respond to it, and then I'll have Marcus's head go, like his internal monologue say something, and I'm just sitting here doing this back and forth, like, no, just arguing with myself. But there's times I've had one of my actors, Paige, who does the voice of Claire. She's told me several times where, like, recording, she's like, she'll read the line and she's like, it's not coming out. She's like, Vega, this sounds like something you would say, not something Claire would say. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, shit, you're right, I'm sorry. And she'll change it to what her character would say, which does nothing but fill me with joy, because it tells me, like, here's somebody who knows this character even better than I do.
That's amazing.
And I created this character, and you've turned this character into something that I can't even comprehend. That's what actors do. That's what the good actors do. That's their job.
Yeah.
Is to take, be true to the character and, present them in a way that is just something that the writer can't comprehend, because that's what their job is. And that's what I love. That's what my favorite part is, actually, is like having them read the words and making it their own. And that's when it really becomes this collaborative effort.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, that's always my biggest fear, like passing stuff on to someone else. That's even what we were talking about with Kat earlier, is like giving away some of the creative to someone else. Like, how do I trust someone else with my baby, with my vision? But I mean, that's just, you got to find the right people.
It's exactly what it is. It's exactly what it is. Because I for this show, I write, compose the music, produce, edit, mix, engineer, master. Literally everything you hear.
Yeah.
For whatever you love about it, whatever you hate about it, rests on my shoulders. And there's something really cool about that, because it's like, if we were saying before, this is like my own portfolio that I can kind of give to people and be like, yo, this is for everything. This is me. I mean, I don't always want to work like this, because I do like working with people. I want to build a team and a force together, but it's the same thing. Like, I know a lot of talented mixers and engineers, and I will be selective once I actually do get to that point of actually having some real funding, so I can produce this on a platform that'll be bigger than just what I'm doing at my house. But that's the thing, is like, picking the right person who can take what you've been able to take those colors and that sound and expand it and only enhance it and make it into like a bigger thing that you can't imagine. That's what I love. Like I have just having the actors, my photographer Justin Blodgett, who was just, I mean, he's a king. He's a really phenomenal like photographer. He's traveled all around the world, done all kinds of crazy stuff, but he wanted to help out with this, and he's given images and the character backgrounds to all these characters, you know, and has like really brought them to life in a way that I didn't even know and helped them understand who their characters were. So again, trying to treat this like an actual TV series as best I can. But
that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
And these types of shows are really like kicking off like crazy hard. Like in the past year, even like so many have popped up.
Hundreds, dude. Hundreds.
It's pretty nuts.
Yeah.
Did you ever think it was going to get like that? Because you said kind of in the beginning, you were like, these are a lot of kind of nonfiction shows. I want to make a fictional show. Guess a lot of people kind of were thinking the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, and I got involved in
because the money seems to be coming there too. People are realizing that like, holy shit, podcasting is kind of this weird like new/old frontier.
Yeah.
It's like we've always had radio and we kind of like abandoned it for a bit, but now people are coming back to it.
Yeah, and people can control it and people can do their own radio and stuff. Yeah, I mean, you started to see the trends a couple years ago. I think between 2016 and 2017, it blew up with audio drama for sure. Because I got involved in it a couple years ago is when I started getting involved in the groups and, you know, whatever. And I launched at a time that everybody was launching. So, you know, but it was the right thing to do. Because if I did it any earlier, yeah, I probably would have gotten a little bit more of an audience because there's so many shows to sift through that it's kind of hard to
stand out.
To stand out. But I'm glad I waited because I'm not going to put something out just for the sake of putting it out. You know, I take my time with it. And even my fans have been asking, like, when is this coming back? When are you putting out the next season? When are you putting out the next episode? And I communicate with them. I always do. I was like, hey, you guys want it to be good. You got to wait because I'm not going to let you down and put something. I don't want to let you down and put out something just to put something out.
Yeah, it's like Westworld or Game of Thrones or any of those big shows. It's like you don't get it in a week.
Yeah. So I think it has been growing. I mean, to the point where you have companies that, you know, movie studios and networks are looking for podcasting to see how, I mean, look at Lore, right? Lore, Aaron Mahnke's show. I remember, I'm going to be a hipster right now and say, I was one of the first people that listened to Lore when it came out a couple years ago. And I remember listening to this, this is so cool. I love these stories, love the storytelling. And then it blew up. And then 6 months later, Homeboy gets a deal with Amazon and it has Amazon Prime videos and like, you know, that series. And I think they got renewed for season 2. And while his intention wasn't to turn it into that, and that's not, I'm not doing this because I'm like, oh, maybe I'll get a network deal. I wanted to create my own thing, but it has grown in popularity, and a lot of these shows have been. And that's even the thing in this world, too, of having people that you can tell the ones who are passionate about it and who want to tell these stories and put the time into it, and then the ones who are like, oh, maybe this will be, you know, a means to get funded to do all, then that's their sole purpose is like, you know, just to be on TV and get their name out there and stuff. Yeah. So I think it's going to continue to grow. There's a handful of really good ones out there. There's a lot of stuff that's kind of like, you know, people are still working on it because it takes a while to learn. Even me, like I listened to my first episode and then my most recent one, and the first one, I'm like, God, it's so rough to me. It comes to garbage. I'm not doing this ever again. I'm leaving. You know what I mean? Like that's just your own, like, you know, internal.
Someone told me it's going back to Bumble. Oh my gosh, full circle here. Yeah. Someone messaged me on Bumble this morning and was like, "Is that really your podcast? Oh my gosh, that's so cool." I'm like, yeah. I was like, if you're not a robot, go rate it 5 stars on iTunes or some shit like that. It was like, that was my response.
That's amazing.
But she responded to me this morning and was like, I just downloaded the first episode, gonna listen to it on my way to work. I'm like, oh no, the first episode, what a cringe fest.
Oh my God, that's so funny.
I was like, don't cringe too hard on your way to work, you might get in an accident. but it was funny because like, I'm the same way. Even though my first episode, I can go back and I don't think it's trash, but at the same time, there's a lot of things that I've gotten better, and it's been cool to like actually get that feedback too.
Yeah.
Like,
well, you just hit your anniversary, right?
Yeah, my anniversay was Monday.
Wow,
yeah. Well,
man.
The thing is, like, you know, obviously anniversary of the launch, like the big launch, you know, because I launched with 8 episodes at the launch. That was like kind of the big push, and I was talking to my brother last night, and he was kind of talking about that because the idea was actually to get to 100 episodes by my birthday. And originally I was going to try to do it before then, and then it, kept getting delayed and all this stuff. And the beginning of this month, I had this big trip planned. I was going out west for, a couple of weeks, and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't have episodes recorded. I need a lunch, and blah, blah, blah. And I just realized, I just kind of like sat myself down almost. I was like, dude, it's okay. Yeah. You've got 90 episodes out. If there's probably nobody that's listened to every single one to its entirety. Mm-hmm. If people want to listen, there's other shit they can listen to, right. And just like, having that, and I'm like, okay, yeah, you're right. Like and taking a break was amazing. Like having this break for a few weeks was like, it was like fantastic, because I was able to kind of have that weight off my back and not have any pressure. But I did record some episodes, and recording the episodes is my favorite part. Like, this is not stressful for me. Like, this is fun. Yeah. I think some podcasters get like really caught up in the like, oh my gosh, I gotta go talk to somebody. Like I'm like excited for that, like meeting up with you and all that. I was like stoked. Yeah. But okay, now I gotta like write the show notes, and like, oh, now I gotta like promote it, and like, oh, now I gotta make the thing. And not that those are all bad or that I hate that so much, but it's like, it's a lot of work, So yeah, man, the anniversary is like kind of a big deal. And you hit yours too, right? Well, no, you said you launched in August.
We launched in August.
You started working on it like back in January.
Yeah,
okay, cool.
I did hit the point where I actually did announce it about a month ago, because we did this video trailer that I put. Actually, this is the other thing I didn't even say was where I started writing. The story is based off of my hometown, so I actually got my hometown involved in it. I have some friends that still live back up there, and my friend who has a drone, and he does a bunch of like really cool shots, and he sent me all this footage, and I wrote music. I wrote this like creepy trailer music, because my hometown is very beautiful and quaint. I'll have to send it to you, but it's really like quaint and beautiful and like suburban and stuff. And then he posts the videos on Facebook, got all these views, and on April Fool's, we launched one that starts off as a very happy-go-lucky thing, and it transitions into this dark, creepy, like, what is going on? And everybody that watched it, and it ends with the title Rose Drive, which Rose Drive is an actual street in my hometown. It's one of our main streets. So people were like, saw it, and they're like, oh my God, is this a joke? Is this not? And then it had the Facebook link, so they clicked on it, and they're like, oh my God, what is this? This is a show coming out.
Oh, that's so cool, dude.
It was
genius. I love marketing stuff like that.
Oh yeah, it was cool, and especially, because again, at the time, I was like, I don't write, but if I were to write, they say write from what you know, and I definitely know where I grew up. So a lot of the environments and places that they travel to in town are real spots. And when the first episode launched in March, my town's newspaper hit me up, and we got like a front page article and stuff, which was really kind of cool. They were like really excited about it, and
that's so dope, man.
Yeah, so that's
cool.
That helped a lot, because I got a lot of people, my friends from back home and beyond that were invested and got really excited about it, and got word of mouth out that way. And then also making sure that the story isn't so specific to one location and where people can't relate to it.
Yeah.
There's a couple little Easter eggs in there for people who know the environment.
Exactly.
Which is fun.
That is fun.
Yeah.
Because that, like you said, it's, anytime that your friends or your family or whatever can get involved and feel like they're a part of something that you're doing, that's cool, you know. But you also, like you said, don't want to isolate it. That was one thing that on April Fool's Day, I did a prank. Did you see that at all? Okay. So you might have thought it was real. So, or you might have not seen it at all. But so a lot of people have messaged me about this because of this very thing that I did. So this was my test of sound design and being able to convince somebody, like you said, how do I convince somebody that I'm talking, that this person that's here and this person in a barn in Alaska is talking? So my task was, I'm going to make a fake podcast where I interview somebody who's like an aspirational person that I'd really want to do a podcast with, but I didn't actually interview them. So I chose Casey Neistat. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's like a YouTuber. Okay. YouTuber is like such a like loaded word these days. Like, oh, he's a YouTuber. He vlogs and like annoys people. But like that's not what he does. He blew up a couple years ago because he started doing like daily vlogging. But his videos are very like cinematic, very like highly produced and edited and all that stuff. But also have this like rugged quality to them where it feels almost like homemade, but like very high thought level to everything. Like he does a lot of, instead of like holding the camera, he like sets up the camera and walks around, and it's like, whoa, does he have a cameraman? Like what's going on? You know, stuff like that. Anyways, I love Casey Neistat. And anyway, so I wanted to do a fake podcast with him. So what I did was to, I first of all, I needed his voice, and I needed some content to work with. So he recently started Twitch streaming.
Okay.
So there's a lot of stream of consciousness talking there. So I pulled some audio from that, and I pulled some audio from other podcasts that he'd done recently, like some other people's podcasts that he'd been a guest on.
What?
And I was like, how do I spin this? Because number one, I don't want to make an hour-long April Fool's podcast and then at the end be like, haha. Like that, like, you know, like that, like gotcha.
Yeah.
Like, you know, so I was like, it needs to be like a small one, small enough that people can like get to the punchline like pretty quickly. So I was like, okay, maybe. So this was my premise: was I ran into Casey Neistat at the airport, and he had 20 minutes until his flight, and I asked him, I had my stuff with me, and I asked him if we could do a quick podcast, and he said yes.
Wow.
So that was my premise. And so what I did to because I was like, how do I mask it? How do I make it seem like I'm in the same room? Because my audio is going to be different than his. And I was going to be using it from different sources.
Yeah.
So I found a like hour-long airport noise soundtrack. There was basically like all the background noises you'd hear in an airport, beeping, you know, people talking in the background, all that kind of stuff, you know, luggage. Uh-huh. And I threw that on top of everything, and then essentially kind of whatever questions he was being asked or whatever in the streams, you know, what was happening, I kind of threw my voice into those. So I would even like ask him questions and he would directly respond.
Oh my God.
And it was like, to me, because I was over scrutinizing the shit out of it, because I was like, this doesn't sound right. Like it totally doesn't sound like I'm in the same environment, all this stuff. But people weren't in that headspace of like, this is a prank.
Yeah.
Like that. It fooled so many people, and a lot of people didn't even end up like listening to the whole thing, so they never got to the punchline part. So people were like congratulating me, like, dude, that was so cool that you did a podcast with Casey. I listened to the beginning, blah, blah, blah. Or like, oh, that's so dope and all this stuff.
That's so funny.
And it was so convincing to people. And then I'll have to show you the audio in a little bit, but the ending, I basically made him like glitch and then like shut down like he was like a robot or something.
Oh, wow.
And then I did kind of like a shitty job of explaining how I did it at the end. So even people that got to the end were really confused because they're like, wait, was just the ending fake?
Yeah.
Or was the whole thing fake? Because I was just like, sorry guys, had to do it to you. April Fools, this is fake, blah, blah, blah.
That's so funny.
But like I didn't really explain how I did it, so people were still super confused.
That's hilarious.
And it was a true test of my, that was the first like real sound design and lining up the audio and, you know, all that kind of stuff. That was like my first like real dive into that, and it was really fun. So
dude, that's hilarious.
It was a good prank. It was a good prank. And then also I'm like, when do I reveal that it was a prank? Because like the thing with podcasts is like, as soon as it comes out, sometimes people don't listen to it for like a week or so, you know, or like, you know, they're behind, or, you know, they pick and choose. So I was like, when do I really like make this like a full announcement? And my friend was like, dude, you announced it at the end of the podcast. Like if you don't have, there's no obligation for you to like say what the joke was. So I've never even really like publicly on like social media or anything like come out and said it. But people still to this day like message me like, dude, I saw, like I was looking through your podcast. Congrats on the Casey Neistat one, man. That's big time stuff or whatever. And I'm
That's so funny.
Well, to be completely frank, it was fake.
Oh,
and,
man.
So then I kind of feel bad because these people are genuinely excited for me and like super stoked.
That just shows your multifaceted skills, brother. That's incredible. Shit. That's fun. I'm gonna have to listen to that on the ride back, man.
I was gonna say I'll definitely play you like the ending and beginning in a second because it's too funny for me not to share. But
damn,
yeah, that was pretty funny.
Very cool.
But it also gave me respect for people that make shows like that, like yours. You know, that is like, wow, you know, because not only am I having to deal with my own thing, I'm having to deal with other people's voices and dealing with, you know, lining it up properly and making it sound natural and, you know, all that stuff. So it was a challenge, but yeah, it was worth it. It was so fun. I'd been concocting it in my brain for months, and and it was the perfect storm too, because he recently, like, he stopped daily vlogging, and then he started this new show, and he had announced that he's like, I'm kind of going dark for like a month or like a few weeks to kind of like prepare everything for my new show and spend some time with the family and all this stuff. There wasn't really that much like content up until then, but he had done like a podcast and he was Twitch streaming, so he was kind of talking about the new show and like saying like, yeah, it's gonna be cool, it's gonna be big, I can't really say much, but blah blah blah. So he's using those pieces of audio to like promote his new show on my thing. Dude. And like, to be honest, like listening to that podcast alone, it was a good podcast because the content was still all his. It was still all him talking. And like I listened to it, I was like, damn, that was a good podcast. Like, you know, like literally it's all fake and stuff, but like,
that's genius.
It was pretty funny. Anyways,
that's hilarious.
Anyways, yeah, that was my grand April Fool's joke. But dude, like I love what you did too. That's amazing. That's like kind of like that hacking, because April Fool's jokes can be kind of goofy and stupid.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, okay, we get it. Like you're a brand trying to be like trendy and like make some dumb joke. But like I like stuff like that where it kind of, you think it's one thing and then it turns. Yeah. And you're fooled. You're actually fooled.
Well, and that was the thing too.
Rather than just being suspicious from the moment you look at it.
Exactly. And I think that's why it wasn't quite an April Fool's joke, because it really was. If you wanted to do the research and be like, wait, is this a real thing? You could look at it and be like, oh shit, it actually is a real thing. So, you know, I used April Fool's Day as a way to kind of promote and get the word out of what the show was. And once that happened, a lot of people were like, oh my God. Like then they started following on Twitter and Facebook, so then they got the updates when it finally launched and stuff. But yeah, it was fun.
I was going to say, I can't remember what it was, but at the end of the podcast, like it was after like the first few episodes, you started like saying a thing at the end where like people could like, what was that? Because I can't remember what it was specifically, but I remember thinking, I was like, oh, that's really interesting, that's really cool.
So my way of doing show notes, instead of interrupting the story, instead of starting it with me talking or ending it with a credit scene or something, I like to keep my listeners just in that world from the beginning to end. Yeah. So part of the storyline is Marcus, at the very end of interviewing people and talking to all these interviews, he kind of has this decompression where he talks into his own podcast and says, hey guys, like I don't think I can do this on my own, I really need your help. So he opens the door for listeners to help chime in and give their opinions on the people he's interviewed. So that's where I put in my show notes. So I have Marcus say, you know, leave us a rating on iTunes, like, you know, comment, whatever, leave me whatever comments you like you're not gonna hurt my feelings. Because I don't want to just be someone that's like, give me a 5-star rating and blah blah. Dude, leave it whatever you feel you need to. I've had some funny ratings too, which have been really good. People getting really like
butthurt.
Yeah, it's so good.
Me too, man. I've had a couple. Yeah. Like they listen to one and they find like one thing they're pissed off about, and they're like, "Really? You talked about Nazis or something?" It's like, sorry.
Oh no, it's great, man. I love it. Those ones are always really entertaining to me. I'm like, dude, just let him out, dude. Say what you gotta say.
Be polarizing. You got to be polarizing, because if you're just saying shit that everyone agrees with, then like you might as well be saying nothing at all, kind of.
Exactly. Well, so what we do with our show notes is I'll have it in the world of Rose Dress. So Marcus will give the show notes by saying, you know, but it also acts as a way for the listeners to engage and be part of the story. So they can go on the website at rosedrypodcast.com and go to the theories tab, and after they've listened to the characters' episode, they can comment and see what their theories on them. Did they believe them when they said this? Did they believe them when they said that? Were they telling the truth? Were they lying? How is Marcus's view skewed from this, you know? And I've had some very interesting fan theories come in, especially at the end of the season.
That's cool that you give people an avenue to do that.
Always, man.
Because there's always, like, with big time stuff, there's always, like, I feel like Reddit is kind of like the place that people go for that type of stuff. Yeah. But, like, or, like, there's always, like, a weird little forum where people, or a Facebook group or something where people, like, exchange theories and stuff. So it's cool to just be like, well, if we want our show to be big time and we want our show to, like, be, you know, a place where people are going to have these type of things, like, let's give them an outlet.
Exactly.
So we can kind of, you know, get people involved and feel like they're part of it. Yeah. That's awesome, man. I really like that. Yeah, thank you. That is pretty genius. Did you think of that, or was that?
No, I did, because I knew how important it was to have the show notes. I know that's the thing they tell you to do. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to do it, but I don't want to do it in a way that sounds like I'm begging for people to, like, because my thought is, like, I'm not going to sit here and try to convince you with my words of saying why you should listen and why you should share this to whatever. Like, if it's vibing and resonant, that doesn't mean I'm not promoting it and I'm not doing as much marketing as I can, but I'm also not going to like start every episode or end it with me talking and being like, hey guys, I worked really hard on this, so if you can please just, help me out, leave a review.
I know that the audio wasn't perfect, but I'm doing the best I can. We're low budget. I'm doing it in my mom's basement.
Exactly,
dude.
No, man.
Please, really help me out. If you rate it 5 stars, if you want to rate it 1 star, just don't even go on there. Yeah. People get real cheesy and weird with that shit. And I try not to be, I know how important that stuff is, but at the same time, it's like, really, if your show's gonna grow, it's gonna grow.
Exactly.
Like, people are gonna talk about it word of mouth. You know, it's like if people are into a show and they really, are vibing it or whatever, iTunes, obviously, if you can hit that trending page or whatever, like, awesome. But at the end of the day, I think, just having a high quality show that people listen to. Yeah. People are going to write reviews regardless. So,
and that's what I wanted to do, man. I wasn't, because you see it, you listen to podcasts on podcasting, go to these groups where they talk about, this is how you game the iTunes algorithm, this is how you do this, and I was like, God, you're doing this for the wrong reason, man. Like, no, like, make good shit, and people are going to want to share it.
Exactly, man.
And I'm not someone...
People are always looking for that secret sauce or, like, that extra little thing, like, how can I game the system, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And it's like, how about you make a good show?
Yeah, just have good content, and believe it or not, that'll work itself. And something like this, it's taken a bit. It was really strong in the beginning. Then January and February was a little quiet, but it started to pick up a lot. And now people are just discovering it, and it's really cool that they are. That's awesome. They're like, "Oh my God, this is cool," and I'm liking this. And when's the next season coming out? I'm having almost more now that it's the first chunk is out,
which is weird, right? Because you would think that like when you're releasing it is when you're going to get all the traction,
right? And you don't. Yeah,
dude. I was looking because I had taken a backseat to the podcast for a minute. And I was looking at my analytics last night. Last month was my biggest month ever.
That's crazy.
And I didn't put out like any episodes.
Yeah, you took a breath.
I took a breath, and then it was just like, wait a second, what? Yeah, and that was kind of like what my brother was talking to me last night about. He's like, dude, you have such a library that like you can like afford to like take a break. It's not like you put out like 10 episodes then stopped, you know? And not to say that 10 episodes isn't a big deal, but like at the end of the day, I think there's a lot of shows out there that, they put out a couple episodes
and then you don't hear from them,
and then you never hear from them, and and especially with like a show that is like character driven or something like that. If you put out only like a couple episodes, it's hard for you to like look at that and want to even get invested because you're like, I'm gonna get invested in these characters and I don't even know if the show is gonna return.
Yeah.
Or like whatever, it's not gonna get renewed. Like why do I even want to waste my time? I'm never gonna find out what happened to Marcus or whatever.
Exactly.
So all that kind of, ties in, but yeah, man. Well, dude, I feel like this was an awesome podcast.
Yeah.
I feel like we can kind of wrap things up. But one thing I was going to ask you, I kind of actually at the end of the podcast, I'm obviously going to splice this in later, but I wanted to actually like play a piece of one of your podcasts at the end so people can kind of get a taste of it. That would be really cool. So I'll definitely have to get that from you.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate that, man.
Because I was going to say to the people out there, like, obviously you're listening to this show, but if you're looking for something kind of different, something a little, because I've been in that mind space too. Like especially the past year, I've been so overloaded with podcasts. I'm like, now in the car, I'm like, I need to listen to some music or something. I'm tired of podcasts for a minute. Or I'm tired of listening to freaking advice or learning or whatever. I need to get some fiction in my life. So there's definitely, time and place for everything. So if you're interested in Rose Drive, I'm going to play a little piece of it right now for you. But obviously, you can find it on iTunes and wherever you're listening to this podcast right now. I'm sure you can find Rose Drive as well. But
on Spotify now too. Spotify now too.
Wow, that's big time. I'm not on Spotify yet, so very cool stuff. Are you using? We don't even have to talk about this on the podcast. But are you using Libsyn?
Libsyn, yeah.
So I was gonna say, I know Libsyn just introduced like a tie-in with Spotify. It's pretty cool. Yeah. But
I will say this though, if I can.
Of course. I was gonna say any other place that people can find you or all kinds of stuff.
So rosedrivepodcast.com has the website, and it has, the background has every episode up there. So if you're not listening on a podcast app or a podcatcher or whatever, you can listen to it there. We're on YouTube. You can look us up on that. Facebook group, Instagram, Twitter, all at Rose Drive Podcast or Rose Drive Pod, some variation of it. It's the same logo, so you'll find it anywhere. I will tell you guys this right now. It is serialized. It's a serialized audio drama. So if you're listening on Spotify or Overcast, they tend to cascade things from newest to oldest. Do not start with that on this show. You will be very, very, very confused.
Definitely.
They're all numbered, so it'll be episode 1, the title, episode 2. And like I said, right now we have 15. So start with episode 1 and go all the way down the track. I think in Spotify you can actually change the order from oldest to newest instead of newest to oldest.
That's cool.
So make sure you listen from beginning to end, episode 1 through 15, because otherwise you'll be confused. But besides that,
and
guys,
you'll probably have some spoilers.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Well, one of the guys who interviewed me last week, he started with 15 on accident. He was like, what the hell is going on? Then he went back and listened to one. He was like, okay. So for him, it gave him some interesting perspective, but I would recommend just starting from the beginning.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's one thing that with my show, like I said, like going back to episode 1, it's kind of like, it's not pointless, but like you don't have to.
Yeah.
Like I've gotten better, hopefully. So like you can if you want to go back to
but
this.
It's legacy stuff, man.
Yeah,
people want to hear that. People love hearing where it started and where it's turned into.
Exactly. And that's why I knew that those like milestone episodes, the first ones I put out, were going to be so important.
Yeah.
Because I've been curious like that with other podcasts and gone back and listened to the beginning one. So
yeah.
But dude, this has been an awesome podcast. Thanks for being on the show, man.
Thanks,
yeah, definitely everybody go check out Rose Drive. It's pretty awesome.
Thanks, guys.
All right, well, we'll catch you later. See ya. Boom. There we go. Make sure you check out the Rose Drive podcast wherever you're listening to this episode. If you made it this far, I have a pretty good feeling that you enjoy this conversation. So I think you would also really enjoy going back to listen to episode 55 called Get Paid to Learn with Andrew Winchell. Andrew's a super talented freelance video editor and graphic designer. He's worked with some huge global brands. I don't know if I'm allowed to legally mention who he's worked with, but just know that he's a pretty big deal. And he's also an eating disorder survivor. It's not too often you get to hear men really, talk about that subject publicly, and I'm really glad he was able to be so transparent and share his story dealing with that, because it's obviously not something that he's, necessarily proud of, but something that's in our society, and many people want to hear about it. So this is another example of someone who was working for someone else for years in the creative space, and he decided to do his own thing, and he is actually killing it now. When we recorded the podcast, it was right when he decided to go freelance and quit his job, and I've invited him to come back on the show to talk about his major success over the past year. I think we're going to be recording that in November, so stay tuned for that one, and go back and listen to episode 55. Coming up next, we've got episode 97 with Dr. Carrie Rose and LaShawn Curb. And Dr. Carrie Rose is an educator, she's an entrepreneur, keynote speaker, and she was actually listed as Huffington Post's Must Follow Women Entrepreneurs last year, which is pretty cool. And she holds a doctorate, an ED, an ED, I don't know how to say that properly, but it's in educational leadership from the University of Central Florida. She wrote her doctoral dissertation on professional development, and she is also known for her innovative teaching strategies and methodology on course completion rates and connecting online course development with the science of learning. And that sounds like a lot, but basically she helps people develop online courses that don't suck and that actually get completed. And she works with entrepreneurs, online marketers, and businesses all around the country. And her partner, LaShawn Curb, not only is her partner in life, but also her business partner. And he's a brand strategist. He's a digital media influencer and also a keynote speaker. And basically, he was inspired to make a larger impact, and he has developed a proprietary process that leverages the power of human connection with personal branding and digital products. And this was an amazing conversation because you were able to hear how kind of these two minds came together. But it's fascinating because not only, like I said, are they partners in life, but they're business partners, which is really, really cool. They have a very unique perspective on what they do. So definitely stay tuned. And also, this was amazing because I actually, during our podcast, Dr. Carrie said, I mean, she's a doctor of education. She said that she's not encouraging her kids to go to college. That's pretty big time. That was powerful as fuck. And if you don't think that's a big sign that times are changing, I don't know what more you're looking for. But anyways, that was a pretty big deal. I was mind blown by that. That episode's coming out on Thursday. Don't freaking miss it. If you want to support the show, go to iTunes, Apple Podcasts, whatever the hell they're calling it these days, and rate it 5 stars. Really helps me out, get the show out to more people. And also, if you want to share it with your friends, there's lots of times on Facebook I see where people say, hey, I'm looking for podcast recommendations. If you enjoyed the show, I would love if you've, said, hey, check out the Andrew Deitch podcast. You can also just type in a GIF and type in the GIF that I have. I have official GIFs on Facebook and Instagram now, which is pretty dope. You just type in my name or you type in AD podcast or whatever, and you'll be able to find my custom GIFs so that it'll actually stand out more than just saying, hey, check out the Andrew Deitch podcast. You can post a GIF of my logo or whatever else. Anyways, I'm lame. But if you want to follow me, go to andrewdeitch.com. You can find the links to all of my social media handles and accounts. That's pretty much all I got. Thank you guys so much for listening, and I will see you in the next episode.
Raul Vega. Yeah.